Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. Yeah, that's right. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? You lost your job, your family started fucking freaking out on you. Holidays became a little bit more awkward, but it's all good because we're all here together. And I've got an awesome show for you guys today. And we're going to talk about some really interesting things. We'll get into the main topic of the day. But first, I just kind of want to welcome you, Juan. And welcome everybody to the show, the Blue Collar Mystics. We are here to ask these questions, to be a support for all the people, because I don't know about you. We were just talking about how difficult it can be to kind of look into this stuff, to ask these questions, to go deep, and because you find out shit that you don't want it to be true. It's like, this is brutal. I don't want to know this. I wish I had never asked this question. These types of buyer's remorse kind of questions. And when I started asking these questions, there was no one. There was very few podcasts or anything even then that even touched on these ideas, but so much has come out. I mean, a flood of information. Some of it's shit too, like the mud flood, right? We were just talking about. But we're here asking these questions, and that's really what's so cool about the group and the community that we have as resources. What's the hardest thing is admitting to being wrong. And I think that's that on an individual level, like as a person, because most people think they have a grasp on the world. I know what the world, I know what life is. I know what this is, all this shit. But if we can be bold and courageous enough to say, hey, maybe I am wrong. Like, let me consider some other ideas and possibilities. Which takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of strength, courage, all that cheesy shit. But I think it can ultimately lead to certainly a better understanding of who we are, but also maybe we can get a little bit more perspective, understand history a little bit, see what's going on in context, because it's real easy to be reactionary if you don't have proper context, like you're like, well, this thing just happened to me, but if you were able to zoom out and see it from a higher level, you might see all the other influencing factors and maybe not react so passionately or without consideration or irrationally. But I love your work. I love everything that you do. Like I was saying to you a little bit before, I just had the opportunity to open this. I'm very late to the party, but I'm happy to be a late bloomer. The chosen Juan is, of course, Juan Ayala of the One-on-One podcast. And he's done a comic book now with Paranoid American. They sent me so many goodies. I got all these cool stickers and cool stuff. So, go and check that out. Let's talk a little bit about that first, if you don't mind. Cause like I said, I am late to the party, but it is something that I think is so fucking cool. And I'm really glad you guys are doing this, because it's a brilliant way. It's like the meme war, right? Like you put out this little meme, right? And it gets kicked in somebody's head. The comic book, I think, is a very similar approach.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion project. I don't know about getting rich anytime soon doing it, but yeah, we do the Chosen Juan versus the Saturnian Cube. I'm shooting for 6 issues, right? Because the number 6. And that's Abraxas here in the back, our version of Abraxas. And this particular story is about a relic that I get from an interdimensional being, and those who do swap casts with me get special powers. And as done through Paranoid American Comics. You can either get a copy on his website or my website, the101podcast.com. I also do another publication, the Occultis Mundi. It's occult and esoteric topics, such as the one that we're going to be talking about today, and just different writers from the community. Mark Steves from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. We have Paranoid American in there. We have Slick Dissident, Homie Romy, a bunch of different names, LC King. And if you have some stuff, bro, laying around that you want to submit, feel free. I try and put it out every month. It's just something I started recently. But this whole comic thing, I think that what we were talking about at the beginning, a lot of people, not only is it like a medium that everyone can relate to, right? Growing up and picking up comic books, I liked anime too, manga and things like that. And just art really portrays these primal ideas. It's crazy that we look at all these ancient civilizations and they have similar symbols. That's because symbols are the language of the soul. And it's just like mathematics. No matter 2 + 2 is 2 in any language, in any place that you're at. And it goes back to symbols. I think that's very important, because the whole mimetic occultism thing, the reason that a meme resonates with so many people, it's not because of what they're observing physically and consciously. It's what it does to the subconscious. And when it's implanted in that subconscious realm, that's why it's so effective. But yeah, I love drawing. I wish I could draw as best as these guys. These guys are really great. And funny story, the original artist that started with us on this project, Igor Shakal, he started working with the guys from Rippaverse, and they went viral. Damn. They raised over $400 million for a comic book series, dude. He got offered unfortunately, he had to put us on hold and go and accept a full-time gig doing art, which is great for him, right? I mean, good for him. Sucks for us, because now we have to find another artist, because this is a team. And what a lot of people don't understand, it's 5-6 people. There's a writing process. The writing process, I don't consider it a writing process, because I'm just having fun. It's literally me and Paranoid American on the phone, like, hey, dude, you want to put some dicks in there? It's like, dude, that's awesome. And like, we'll be texting each other and be like, all right, I know this sounds really dumb, but hear me out. What if and he goes, dude, that's actually really cool. So we put it in there. Like, we start with like this blob, and then we go refining it as time goes, so it becomes its own organic type of thing. And that's literally our writing process. We'll sit down, talk, like, what do we want to get done? Well, we want to get this done. How are we going to get there? Who are we going to encounter? Et cetera, et cetera. There's lizard people at the DMV. Okay, what's next? Well, the lizard people are hanging up their lizard coats, their people coats on the hangers, right? And there's still lizard beings, right? And at the end of the day, they jump into their skin or something. So it's just like fun stuff like that you can't really portray when doing a podcast. And I want to branch out. I told you about going and doing guided tours around Florida. I want to just start doing different things that a lot of people, not that a lot of people aren't doing it. You have Higher Side Chats doing similar things. You have the guys at Gramerica killing it. They're doing tours and whatnot, right? In the mountains and in Egypt. So I think that's what's next as the show grows and we get a bigger following. And a lot of people are cool. Right, obviously you can't read the comments on YouTube because they're cancer, but you know what I'm saying? I'm surrounded with a great group of people in the community, and I like bringing people together to brainstorm and just be fun. And I think the first step, bro, at the core of everything is don't take yourself too seriously, because once you start taking yourself too seriously, the fun gets sucked out of it. And I think part of the alchemical process, because what we were talking about earlier, the reason that for you do stand up, the reason that you're able to go up there, that's not easy, bro. Going up there and being vulnerable. A lot of people bomb, but when you're up there, you're making those people feel like, hey, that guy's he's making it look easy. Yeah, because that's a skill that you have where you put people at ease doing that. And I recently just went on Those Conspiracy Guys with Gordo, and he was talking about that, about how these dudes make it look easy, and
Mhm.
that's the skill. You know, when we're researching these topics and we're portraying these ideas and being able to put them out efficiently to where you're able to understand them, that's an art. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely, dude. And I love that you're branching out into other mediums, right? Like that's so cool. You got in doing podcasts, learning, researching, sharing that information, synthesizing it. And then you're like, well, there's cooler ways to kind of get these ideas across. A comic book would be cool because then we could use actual images, you know? And I think a lot of it does come back to image, right? Like all art forms, I think, kind of
everything.
ultimately
Iconography
results.
is
Right.
everything. I mean,
Because,
these
yeah.
people's gods are painted on walls in cathedrals, and
Yeah.
people go there to worship those images. So iconography is everything.
It really is. Yeah. Even in a medium like, let's say, comedy, right? Like you mentioned, if I can get a funny image planted in your head, then you're going to laugh at that image. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to illustrate when I make a point, is the absurdity of something so that you see it in your mind's eye.
You're
But
doing
yeah, I mean,
magic.
yeah, exactly. It's all magic, right? Like it really all is. So I'm excited for you, man. I know you're going to do a lot of really cool and creative things. What a fun thing to see develop. And any of these different mediums, like you say, like comedy or whatever, dancing, podcasting,
Can I
when you
share my
make it,
screen?
yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna show you something real quick. A piece that I got done yesterday. Let me see if I can find it
Badass, man.
on my desktop. My computer shifted everything around.
But yeah, I mean, it ultimately really just it comes down to that creativity and fostering that. I think it's so cool to see it develop. You know, you put the time in, and that's what that alchemy is. Like for instance, stand up. Like I can't tell you how many times I bombed. You know, like everyone does, and that's part of that process because you got to burn out the give a fuck out of yourself so that you're comfortable enough on stage that when you do have something to say that's hilarious, or you want to go on a tangent or a riff, then you don't fear going down that path. You know, you're like, I'm comfortable even if I eat shit, it's fine. And that is honestly part of it, especially a process like that. And I love what you said too, like making it look easy. That's the hard part.
There you
But
go.
certainly if someone looks like they're really smooth at something, certainly they're
Mm-hmm.
doing something you can't even fathom, right?
Because the one of the questions I get all the time, people writing to me on emails and Instagram and all these things. Because, dude, I'm a regular guy. I got a regular 9 to 5. I have 2 kids, a wife, bills to pay. I got all that stuff, right? So when I do this type of research, I do it for fun, and I like interesting conversation. I like to talk about interesting things. So I research what's interesting to me, and what you were mentioning at the beginning, how you weren't hearing certain people talk about certain things. Well, that's why the Juan on Juan podcast was born. Because I said to myself, the Juan on Juan, well, it's kind of racist if somebody else says it, right? Because it's kind of like that Mexican,
Sure.
Hispanic, the most generic name that there is. I hated my name growing up. I was like, Juan on Juan. All right, let's do it. But then I can always count on Juan to show up. Juan will always be there, and Juan's the guy to look for and count on. So I said, okay, I can count on myself. I can't count on anybody else. That's why I don't have a co-host or anything. And I said, okay, Juan wants to hear about things that Juan likes. So boom, that's why when these shows like Rogan, Tinfoil Hat, shout out to Sam Tripoli, all these other shows that give you just a tip, right, the highlights of a certain topic. I wanted more. I wanted what's below that iceberg. What's after the tip, what comes, and that's esotericism, where you start to dive deep into one specific topic, peel all its layers back, and then you're kind of sort of done. There's some people who dedicate their entire lives for one specific topic, like they're known for that one specific thing. Well, I'm sort of like that, but every few months I'll switch it up. This month will be the homunculus, the next month it'll be whatever, then a month after that. So I wanted to dive deeper into certain topics, and they just weren't being covered on other podcasts. So I said, let me just start my own and do that myself, do the dirty work myself, and that's my newest piece, bro. Trust the seance and make a homunculus, bro. There you go. So we all wanted to trust the science, right? Well, trust it because it's there.
Yeah, dude, that's dope. I love that.
you know,
Science, seance. Wow, those are really close. And
yeah. I
And
think it's all the same, bro. Like we're saying, you're doing magic when you're doing stand up. These dudes are doing alchemy, but they just named it chemistry and quantum physics and all this
right.
other stuff. But it all goes back. So what I wanted to portray here was a modern day scientist studying a grimoire, right? This is a grimoire or an encyclopedia or a textbook. It doesn't have to be called a grimoire. And the fact that he's in a modern setting making a homunculus, well, it just shows you, right? They wanted to trust the science. Well, the science, what are the roots of that? And it's these dudes in the alchemical caves back then that were mixing their sperm and all this stuff together to try and make a human creation. Well, just fast forward that, and what's IVF? It's the same thing, creating a human being outside of the matrix, which is the womb, and inserting that into the womb of a woman in hopes that it's going to grow into a full-term baby. That's the same thing, brother, except these guys are wearing white lab coats and they got gloves on. That's it. But it's the same thing. So a lot of people don't understand what they're consuming and where it comes from. And I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. But I'm on the boat that these elites, the lizard people, whatever, are using the same technology. I think magic is a technology of back then. They're using it today in a modern setting.
Yeah, I like that. Is it an Arthur C. Clarke quote where it's like, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
I like that.
And it's an old quote from a science fiction author. I might be wrong about the origin of that quote,
We'll look it up.
but yeah, we can look it up. But yeah, I think a lot of these things are old technology too. I think it's interesting. Like we started off talking about a little bit about the mud flood, all these different rabbit trails, right? Do you want me to leave your screen up, by the way?
No,
I'm
I'm gonna
happy to.
look up that quote because I want to use that actually.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Somebody took that quote and made a really good point with it too, right? Like, so any sufficiently advanced, let's say, alien technology would then be indistinguishable from God, right? If any sufficiently advanced technology.
So yeah, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that was Arthur C. Clarke. We invited several authors to explain what this quote. Yeah, so that was him, and scientist, science writer, author of science fiction.
But is it though? Is it science fiction? I mean, at this point, right? Like so many of these things that we've read as science fiction, even Orwell's 1984, like based on some of the research that I've done, like I used to just idolize that book and think, how could he think so far ahead? But if you're connected to to the elite, the establishment, whatever, and higher, you would see this agenda from probably a mile away, right? Like even around that time at the end of World War II and going into the future of the West. So yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy time to be alive too, because I think I love what you said. Don't take yourself too seriously. You can't even take, you know, yeah, you can't even take this information too seriously because there might be another layer that you peel
Mhm.
back and it changes the whole scene. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, everything, and that's why I talk about the cinemagicians, and that's their role to not only strip away the ego, because you mentioned earlier about being wrong. It's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time, and the biggest part about that, about accepting defeat, accepting failure, I have a hard time because I'm a Taurus, so I'm sort of stubborn. I hate being I hate disappointing people. I hate, you know what I'm saying? Like I hate doing that type of stuff. That's just the way I am. And I think it's important to understand when you're wrong, and hey, when somebody points something, hey, touche, right? You got me. Like what's next? You learn from your mistakes, but some people just can't. And that's when you step into the realm of like identity politics, and people start to take all these ideas, and they start to become these ideas. So
Yeah, they
that's why these
internalize it.
these
Yep.
cinemagicians step in and they portray all these movies, which are essentially sigils in conjunction, one right after another, and people start to live that reality. They start to manipulate that person's reality, and that's all somebody ever knows. Like if you look at a small child, they become a superhero. They are a superhero when they're kids because that's just the way that they think, and they're in their own. That's why I believe we create our own realities, and we're in this bubble, this aura that we portray outwards, and that's what they do.
Scientifically true.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what they do with the media and all these stories. And you touched on a thing. Is it actually fiction? Well, I believe that a lot of these stories of antiquity, they're put out as fiction or as a story in order to occult the fact that it's an actual, based on true events. For example, the whole Frankenstein, it's related to the topic that we're going to be talking about today. That story has some roots in reality. It's based off a guy. It's based off of Dipple, which was an alchemist, lived at the Frankenstein castle, and Mary Shelley's husband was reading alchemical texts, was a lover of the occult. So is it really a story about some guy who wanted to create a monster from different body parts, or did you actually try it? Because there's always going to be that one Florida man who's going to actually take it for real and go, wonder what happens if I put my sperm into this pig or something like that. Let me try it. Because, you don't know people's intentions, and how you're saying maybe there's that one layer, because only the initiated are going to understand exactly what we're reading. The uninitiated are either going to take it for face value and understand it differently. So, but there's a couple which ways we can talk about. Once we get there, we can discuss it, because I have a few different ideas, and we'll dive deep. So yeah,
stoked.
I think a lot of these stories, quote unquote, do have some premise in reality, and that's I call it the transmutation of fiction into reality. I think it's also part of the magic, if you will. I think it's part of the agenda.
100%, man. Story is how we communicate. It just is. Even a joke, even a 2-word joke is a story. It has a rise, a falling action, and a climax and a conclusion, right? Like it's a self-contained thing. And so that's how we as people talk. So this has been known for a long time. And indigenous, or if we could even go back before writing, it's all word of mouth story. So it's so embedded and ingrained in us, the idea of story. And I love how you're using it. And I love that it's leading to these new creative mediums for you. I think it's going to be really, really cool to see what you're putting out, man. And I'm excited to get into this, because I know little about it. There's maybe a few things that I've picked up here and there, but I know very, very little about it. And we're going to be talking about homunculus today, which is, I don't know, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's just like a small person, right? Like it's just like a tiny baby. But I know you've been researching into this quite some time, and yeah, I think, and to your point too about reading these texts, it's kind of lifted a veil of creativity for me, where I felt like a little bit more like an imposter, or like someone who wasn't as talented as these great geniuses that could write these amazing stories. Well, fact is truly stranger than fiction. And if you take that idea and then you just twist it a little bit, something that already is, then it's a great way to talk about a dog whistle for the people who know what you're talking about. If you're going to write Frankenstein or some of these other books, then it's very much way more surface level than potentially it is, than I originally thought. I thought, wow, what an incredible imagination. So I'm of the opinion that monsters are real. That's why kids are scared of them,
Well, I think that, so I've thought about that before, where some artists or authors or writers, whatever, get their ideas from. And I've come to the assumption on that some of these people are in touch, and it sounds crazy, but with outside influences. And we could talk about it off air, because it kind of gets into some weird territory and some certain names that if said online trigger certain things. So, but for the best example that I use is H.P. Lovecraft, a guy who claimed to not be into the occult, yet was writing about heavy occult themes, and everything in it was right? The Necronomicon, which is a grimoire, which is something we're going to be talking about today, because that's what got me into this subject. But a guy, a nerd, pretty much a nerd, a racist nerd, because he was racist, and he was, no, I'm not in the occult, I don't practice the occult, but yet he was having dreams about certain entities visiting him and talking to him. So I think that's the aspect. That's why I named it the Occultis Mundi, because it's a hidden world. I do believe that there is a reality built on top of our reality, and ad infinitum. I think there are certain realities that are built on top of one another, and they interact. And whenever I have a synchronicity or deja vu, I think of it as like an echo in space and time. And I always tell people, all right, I'm supposed to be here. I've done this before, so I must be doing something wrong. And I kind of worry sometimes when I don't have deja vu for a while, like, damn, maybe I took the wrong door that one day, right? Like Schrodinger's cat. Is it dead or is it alive? Well, it's both until you actually observe it. So there's all these endless possibilities. Right now, we're dead and alive at the same time, because that's just the way that the reality, until it's observed, right?
Right.
And I think that some of these writers, because how you're saying, they come up with these great ideas. Wow, how do they come up with all these universes and all these things and that plot twist? What a great plot twist. What a great movie. That's amazing. Well, I think that, again, back to the whole outside entity, outside influence, because H.P. Lovecraft helped birth into reality these incorporeal entities that, according to the lore, if you follow the Cthulhu mythos, they exist outside the fabric of space and time. Well, what better way if they exist outside of that and they can't influence it directly? Well, influence a chess piece within that game, right, to birth you into existence. And I think that's the purpose that H.P. Lovecraft served. He was a vessel for these entities. And by writing them in these stories, right? Stories, back to the grammar becomes the grimoire, or grimoire becomes the grammar, because that's where the word comes from. It's a book on magical rituals and how to invoke certain entities. Well, there you got it. You've essentially manifested halfway. And if you look at the history of the ancients, the Platonic solids, I believe that the purpose that they served was for manifestation purposes, where it's an incorporeal idea, right? Whenever you have an idea, oh, I just got an idea. Well, where'd it come from? I don't know. It just appeared. It just came to me, right? This crazy idea just came to me. Well, it's in the ether, right? It's up here somewhere. From there, it goes into your mind. From there, you portray it into a medium, so either writing or a comic book or whatever. And then these movies, these cinemagicians, they manifest those ideas into an actual thing. So either you have a model of it, right? That's another medium, or a movie. So it's all about manifesting it as quickly as possible, skipping all those steps. And that's where the Platonic solids come into, because for some reason they were obsessed with turning their ideas into solids. So you have the Archimedean solids, the Platonic solids, and I think that's what that served. So when it in the application of magic, the magician is always trying to shortcut that. They don't want to have to be in the ether, go to my mind. From there, I write it down in a magical book. From there, I invoke the spirit and I see it, manifesting from me. No. They want to be able to speak it and boom, right there. If you think about what actors are, that's essentially what they are. In that writer's mind, it started as in the ether, went to their mind, they wrote a script. From there, the actor is invoking that entity, that character into them, and they become that character. They become a vessel for that character. That's why you have some interviews where the actors are like, yeah, I kind of it took over me and I became whoever. Wow, you did such the latest Dahmer. Well, you played such a good Dahmer. Well, yeah, I study these serial killers and they kind of just take over my body and I just kind of become them. It's like, what'd you just say, bro? That you're openly, are you holding a seance? Are you meditating? Are you praying? What are you doing that these, this idea, this archetype, this energy takes over you and you're able to portray it efficiently? Because again, they make it look easy, right? What I said, what have we been talking about? They make it look easy. And I think that's also part of the alchemical process, to where certain people are able to tap into certain things. I'm not saying everybody's doing it, but certain lizard people in Hollywood I think that's also another reason why they have such success, because they're able to tap into this, and maybe not knowingly, because that's another thing. Maybe not knowingly, maybe subconsciously. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a very powerful thing. You said you brought up the homunculus. Well, the OG homunculus, the very first homunculus, is the voodoo doll. That's one of the very first homunculus, the voodoo doll, which is a simulacrum of a man. It is the symbol, it's the image of a man. And whatever we've been shown in Hollywood, whatever happens to that doll happens to the person in real life. So you see him stabbing them through the heart, right? The little pins.
Yeah.
You get a piece of their hair. You've seen all that.
Yeah.
So that's the original homunculus. The either mud, clay, metal, an effigy. So you wonder what the guys at the Bohemian Grove are doing. They were burning an effigy. Again, that was a sort of homunculus. And the word means, it's Latin for little man. And the one that we're going to be focused, I'm going to cover most of them today, because the reason, again, this topic is 3 degrees to 4 degrees of separation from any major topic. And that somebody ran an algorithm for that. Somebody ran the numbers for that. So I'm not pulling that out of my ass. But, oh no, you don't have to pull that.
Oh, sorry.
That's just for me. So the idea that I'm going to be covering a bunch of different ones, but the idea starts with the word homunculus. I'm going to be talking about different examples of the homunculus throughout history. But the word homunculus, let's keep this in mind, because this is very important, doesn't come into existence until the 16th century with Paracelsus. So when I'm talking about the homunculus, it's assumed that by the descriptions of it, that's what they're portraying. Okay? So when I'm talking about the Liber Vitae, which is a grimoire, and they call it a rational animal, right? And a lot of people talk about alchemy and how it is for the creation of gold, right? From turning base metals into gold, becoming rich, and all these things. I think that the original intention of alchemy was to create artificial life. And the reason I say that is because what's the point of making gold when you can make a magical little being that'll lead you to treasures? You understand what I'm saying? Like, why waste your time making gold? Just make that alchemical homunculus. That's also another version of the homunculus. That's going to lead you to the gold. That's going to lead you to the treasure. And it's going to tell you the future. It's going to shift the moon around. Fuck the gold. I want that. And if you think about the leprechaun, what's the leprechaun?
Dude, that just popped into my head while you were fucking saying that. Yeah.
It's a little man. That leads you to what? Where's my pot of gold, right?
That's right.
So... And this plays into cryptids. This plays into mythological beings. It plays a role into everything. When you start to think about it, bro, I've had people hit me up on Instagram, dog, and email me. They're like, hey, Juan, I have a question, bro. I go, hey, what's up? I think I might be a homunculus. I'm like, dude, I write back, I go, bro, that's just, again, it's just a concept that normal people don't do. And like, no, my family's not normal. I'm a homunculus. I don't know if they're trolling me or not. I had another guy hit me up asking me how to take care of his homunculus because his homunculus was angry. So hopefully that guy got it sorted out. Because again, I'm not here to, I call myself the homuncologist, but it's because I'm at the forefront of this new field that is really emerging. And for some reason, bro, everybody loves the topic of the homunculus. Everybody wants to talk about the homunculus. It's like the craziest thing because how you're saying fact is stranger than fiction. And when you start to merge the two, well, you get the storytelling taps into the primal nature of our being, our ancestors sitting around the campfire, telling these crazy stories. It taps into that. That's why all these podcasts that tell stories, and even yours that people call in and tell their story, that's why they're so popular, because people want to hear a good story. So when I'm breaking all this down, people go, this is so crazy. Is it real? I think anything is real as long as you put your mind to it.
Well, there's that question. Is it real? God, how many late nights. But yeah, so I just want to back up just a second to just highlight something you said, and then we'll get into this proper. But it's so succinct, and I think it's just a really powerful and potent idea that you're taking something from the mind and then materializing it. And that's what magic is. And within that, there are slower and faster processes in order to do that. Think about like, so writing on a book, now you've got to convince people to read that book to spread that idea and get that to get more influence. Well, now we have digital media, right? Like me, all these other things that can spread an idea so freaking quickly, even faster. And so one of the big ideas for me, and I think a lot of people in this podcast, like just the idea of a thought form itself, people call it pendulums or
Exactly.
egregores or whatever. But when you create that, yeah. But it's got to come from somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't just come from nowhere. There's got to be something somewhere that originates these ideas.
We're gonna get into all that, Owen, because again, this is why I love this topic so much, and it really piqued my interest. And I just want to introduce how I got into it, because it taps into all that and more, bro. It's really fascinating.
Cool.
And the way I got into it was, right, we were talking about Paranoid American earlier. Well, I have this show called the Occult Book Club, and we do just that. We research, read, look into obscure occulted texts, lesser known books, etc., and we read them, break them down, and talk about them on air. And we were doing Manly P. Hall's All Seeing Eye, which was a journal that inspired my journal, and it's a journal he ran for almost, I think, 50 years. He started in the 20s before he even wrote The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And from 1923 to 1989, I believe, is when he ran it. And a very long time. I don't know how many years exactly, but Manly P. Hall wrote about homunculi. He wrote a story in his journal, and it was about this Masonic Count Kufstein. And when I started reading it, I didn't know what I was like, what is this? A magical. He created 10 homunculi. One was a monk. One was a priest. One was a saint. Like there was a whole bunch of like different descriptions of each, and this is in the 18th century, so it's fairly recent. And some had a body, some didn't. And it's the story of how he created them, and that one of them had magical powers, could show him the future and all this stuff. He had him in his Masonic lodge, and I believe this is in Germany. And eventually, the homunculi try to escape, and his assistant kills one off. Right, the jars break; they can't exist outside the alchemical vessel. And I was like, wow, this is a really fascinating story. So I Google the name, and I come across this thing called the Book of the Cow, but it said Plato's Book of the Cow, the Liber Vitae. And I started looking into that. It's a grimoire from the 9th century. John Dee had a copy of this. It was a manuscript. It's not a book. There's over 15 manuscripts, and the craziest part about it is that this is a text that was never published, because again, at this time, if you were to write about the things that we're going to be talking about, you'd be hung and burned at the stake. You'd be killed, right? It was heretical, blasphemous, whatever. So this Liber Vitae, what these guys would do back then is they would do pseudonames, right? Like pen names on these magical things, so to pass on the knowledge. But it was all handwritten. What really freaks me out about this one is that it's handwritten. There was a bunch of copies at the St. Augustine Canterbury, right? A whole bunch of copies there, but they were all handwritten. So what that tells me is that whoever was actively copying it, there's one thing to read something, there's one thing to type something, but there's another thing to write freehand something. It does something else to the psyche, and that's why journaling is so powerful, because not only is your retention going up like 30%, but there's something alchemically, I believe, going on in the brain when you're physically writing it. There's something more personable. There's something more intimate about it. And when writing about such a heretical topic, imagine the alchemist or the priest or whatever, because a bunch of priests had this book too, this writing. They're actively looking at it. They're reading it. So they're reading it twice, right? They're reading it on the other copy that they're copying it from. And they're copying in their little, so all of them were like small little pieces. and they would keep, it was like a private little journal. So they would have it. And all these copies were all over the place. Again, John Dee had one. And a lot of these copies were mixed in with other legitimate texts. So it would be a text about human anatomy or medicine or something. And they would slip in a page or two of the Liber Vitae, this magical grimoire, and how some scholars say it's used to summon an artificial demon. They would just slip in one or two little pages here in the back to occult it from their bookshelves. So here you have these people, these prestigious people of back then, messing around and possessing these sorts of books that had ideas on, again, how to do certain magical practices. So the Liber Vitae, I Googled it and I came across this whole rabbit hole, bro. When I tell you rabbit hole, whew. So during the Middle Ages, there's something called, right? We had alchemy and you have magia naturalis, which is natural magic. And natural physicians and magicians back then were the same. They were looked at as the same because a physician was only exposing what God had given to man in nature and exposing it for the benefit of man, to heal them, to do whatever. So essentially, what counts as magia naturalis, natural magic, is you're using what's in nature and you're either speeding up the process of what already happened or slowing it down.
Okay.
Whatever is found in nature. And you have astral magic, which is using outside influences from the cosmos, other entities, goetic magic and all these other forms of magic where you're using demonic entities or another entity outside to aid you in the creation of whatever process you want. That's where they drew the line. So this is actually considered Christian natural magic because they were only using things that God put in nature. And you were just mixing them together to get a certain thing. And hey, it was going to happen eventually. If that would have fell into there and that one would have fell, it would have happened. So it's okay. God didn't put it here for no reason. So it's okay if I use it. And so the physicians were exposing in nature what would already benefit man. And obviously you had alchemy, which is, again, that's a whole 3-hour episode on its own. And those who were able to master nature were seen as having great powers, changing the course of the moon. They were able to divinate. They were omnipresent. And these books, these grimoires, were manuals or instructions on how to conduct these magical practices. And the Liber Vitae, it's a pseudo-Galenic / Platonic grimoire. And it's about Galen talking about a work that Plato wrote, allegedly. We know it's not the actual Plato, but these magicians of back then, these sorcerers, they said, hey, in order to give it more prestige or more credibility, just say that Plato wrote it. As, why not? One of the greatest minds of all time. Let's just put his name on it. We don't have to dirty our names up. Boom, send it. So you're not going to find this on Kindle or Audible, because I've had people ask me that too. Like, hey, can I find a copy of this on I want a PDF, bro. I go, okay, I can send you the Latin translation of it. You can look at it all you want, but you're not getting anything out of it unless you know Latin. So there's Latin translations, and I believe the original was Arabic fragmented, because mind you, there's more than 15 copies of it. Some are more complete than others. Some change, so it's not 100%. Hey, this is the one copy. This is that one book. No, it was an idea and a bunch of fragmented little pieces. I know John Dee did have a full copy, of course, right? John Dee, because he had the biggest library in Europe at one point. So this book combines Aristotelian biology, spontaneous generation, and this ritual. It's called begonia, which we'll get into it. It's all Greek, and again, it was influenced by all these great ancient minds. Well, I don't know about great, but at least ancient. And the book is broken up into a minor and major section, and it has roughly 80 experiments. And what really stood out to me out of all these experiments was methods to make armies, giants, and other forms appear in the sky. And as soon as I read that, I thought about like Elon Musk's Starlink, of how a lot of conspiracy theorists say that they're going to use that for Project Bluebeam. So is it real. I mean, some people think space is fake and gay, so I mean, you have that crowd as well.
Right,
But
right.
dude, I brought that up on a show the other day, and the guy was like, "Oh yeah, da da da," and I'm like, "Hey, bro, Tommy Truthful TV." I'm like, "Hey, dude, yeah, space is fake and homosexual." He goes, "Okay, I understand the fake part, but why is it homosexual?" I go, "Dude, I, I don't." I can't tell you. That's just what the streets are saying, bro. That it's not heterosexual, it's homosexual. So he was like flabbergasted, but hey, that's just what I've heard, bro. I'm just portraying the information forward. But this idea that they're going to use this technology, this satellite, in order to portray right the Messiah, the coming Messiah in the sky, and everyone's going to see it. Well, is that really the take, or is it some sort of grimoire magic, some sort of natural magic, or something that they're going to be using in order to? And I just finished doing MK Ultra with Paranoid American.
Such a good episode. Yeah.
And there was a guy in that project that his whole thing was the occult. Like, hey, we're going to study the occult and the effects this has on people. So what I'm getting at with this whole thing is that the elites, the government, the whatever, anybody who's in these higher levels, the richest people in the world, know about these books. And it's like the movie The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp, where these higher ups, they have access to these books that do what? Again, a movie, right? A movie. And we have Johnny Depp. Apparently the cutting of the finger is also a ritual that they do. The cutting off and reattaching, because they reattach his finger. That's also part of a magical practice. I went down some rabbit hole the other day. But this idea that they're able to use these books to invoke certain energies or entities. In that movie, I think it was the summoning of the devil himself, because the devil wrote the book. Hey, they're putting it right out there for you. They know about these grimoires. They know about these books. They know that language has power. That's why it's spelling. Again, that's where the word grammar comes from grimoire, a magical book, for a book on magic, on recipes for magic. So again, another one was, it also shows you how to construct different kinds of magical houses wherein people will suffer seizures, start to tremble, hallucinate, or die. A lot of people don't understand that architecture plays a very big role in magical practices. That's why Aleister Crowley was doing the ritual of Abramelin. He needed to have a house with a certain amount of windows on a certain amount of sides. That all plays a role into all these things. Houses are used as magical talismans to either augment or to augment magical abilities. That's a very big thing. And if you look at Vitruvius, which was a Pythagorean, he talked about how certain rooms could only be used for certain things because of the feng shui, the flow of energy. And I think that they're purposely messing with our feng shui in these houses that we're living in right now, bro. All these cookie cutter communities that are just one shape, they're using that to invoke a certain type of energy in us. And that's why a lot of people are suffering depression. That's why a lot of people went through the whole pandemic depressed. A lot of people got divorced because all these things, because of the energy in their own homes that they were locked up in. They're prisons. There are prisons, but you don't think of it because, oh, my home, my house, right? Well, you're going to be locked up in there for XYZ. And some people are still living that, bro. Some people are still in that mind state because their reality has already been warped. So I think it goes back to all this is related. The Liber Vacay is traced back to the 9th century. It goes by a bunch of different names. Vacay Platonis, Liber Anaguimus, Liber, a whole bunch of names, Allegus Platonis. You get the point. And in order for me to illustrate the connection between the Liber Vacay, because it's called the Book of the Cow, I'm going to start off with the fourth experiment of one of the first four on the major side, because the minor was like the exoteric, how to make lamps that don't turn off, how to grow your plant in an hour. What the author says a lot of people should know about. Everybody should know how to do these things. And then you have the major section, which is the more esoteric and occulted. This is the heavy duty stuff over here. This is where we make the homunculus, right? And you're able to shift the moon from its orbit and all these things. So the fourth experiment, it starts off by taking a cow and building a house with 14 small windows on the eastern side. Again, back to that architectural influence on magical practices. Then you must seal all of them shut, behead the cow, drain all of its blood, and reattach the head back on. You will then sew the mouth eyes, ears, nose, and anus and vulva shut. And I know it's getting a little bit weird, but stick with me because it's going to get weirder. And similar to the ritual begonia, which Virgil wrote about it, and it's a ritual on how to generate bees by beating a baby cow to a pulp and not breaking its skin, leaving it sit for 40 days, coming back, and there's going to be bees generated in the carcass of that cow. And this plays a role in Aristotelian biology, putrefaction, alchemy, all that good stuff. And even in the Bible, where there was the carcass of a lion. When they came back, there was bees that were generated. I think it's the story of Samson. But you take this cow, and you're going to have to beat it. And I'm going to quote this, okay? This is a translation. Take a big dog's penis and incessantly beat the cow with it until the flesh is discolored and its bone is broken. So you need to find the biggest dog penis you're able to find. And this, when I read this, because mind you, we're still on the how I discovered this topic. I had to call Paranoid American up. And I called him up and I said, hey, dude, I came across some stuff. I don't know if you're going to want to get into it. He was like, what is it? Because we were doing a live that day. We were doing a live episode on my YouTube channel that day. I go, hey, dude, I came across this homunculi article on the Manly P. Hall, and I came across this ritual where you got to beat things with dog dicks. And as soon as I said the dog dick, he's like, whoa, yeah, bro. Because Paranoid American's like down for whatever type of thing. He's like, bro, it's not gay if it's for a magical practice. I go, dude, it's gay either way. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's that kind of friend. So I start talking about this, and I go, okay, but the biggest dog dick, how do you even go about finding the biggest dog dick? How do you know you have the biggest one? What if you're beating this cow and all of a sudden you see another dog walk by and he's got a bigger dick than the original one that you have? So that really just blew my mind away. And I linked this to, as of recently, a few months ago, because I think another thing is magical rituals, magical practices are meant to be changed, adapted to the practitioner's needs. Mm-hmm. And you have the evolution. I'm going to use this example from Crowley to Parsons, from Parsons to L. Ron Hubbard, if you want to count them in there. L. Ron Hubbard to Margie Cameron to Epstein, because we do make those connections. I do make those connections. And as of recently, the biggest shipment of donkey penises, was just seized by, I believe it was the Nigerian or Chinese government. That's a particular thing to be smuggling. A bunch of donkey penises. And when you start to dive down that rabbit hole, well, apparently there is a whole market for exotic animal penises out there. Okay? It makes you think of what Dahmer was doing. Dahmer was doing what? Collecting body parts. Mm-hmm. And he was also keeping what? The penis of these men that he was killing. He was breaking the taboos of the taboos. Right? There's no other taboo that you can break. I believe he was some sort of necromancer. He was doing some things with these bodies. And that's why I think that he was going to build an altar. He was building an altar, bro. I'm saying like that was the occult, but again, the darkest depths of the occult, because it's just like the Force. You can either use it for good or you can use it for evil. You know what I mean? And these guys choose to take it to those depths of depravity, of when you regress it that back, where it's like, hey, they believe that they achieve divinity by even no matter what they do. So that's their ideology. So when you start to align all these things together, go, okay, so there's a whole market for exotic animal penises. All right, whatever. Has nothing to do with a 9th century grimoire, right? That's just me making assumptions that aren't there. So after you beat this carcass, the biggest dog, and I have cows, and they're like dogs, bro. They're adorable. So yeah. I don't know how you could even go about doing this, but after this step, you split the cow skin after 7 days and remove the marrow-like substance, which you must then take and grind with an unknown herb. And this is where it gets into the, hey, can I recreate this? Well, if you're able to find out what that unknown herb is, you take that mixture, you put it in the corner of the house where it eventually become worms. Every day thereafter, you need to open a window, throw a handful of powdered bees at the worms until you have living bees. And if you do this in reverse, bro, guess what? You get a cow from dead bees. So that's the fourth experiment of the first four. And when I read that, obviously I didn't know what to think because it's really bizarre.
Sure.
And I believe, now hear me out, because we're going to get into the whole, is it metaphorical? Is it literal? Well, I think it's literal because the Liber Vitae isn't particularly an alchemical text. It's not a text about finding the Philosopher's Stone or anything of that nature. And again, the one that, this is before Paracelsus, which made the Alchemical Homunculus popular. So we're talking about things before the Alchemical Homunculus came to being. So I think this is an actual thing. Now, people have asked me, well, is the homunculus like a cryptid? Is he happy to be here? Is he sad to be here? It does the bidding of its creator. It's going to do whatever its creator wants. I don't know if it's happy or not. I do think that there is and I'll get to the metaphorical part of it and the physical. I do believe that there was a literal homunculus at some point. And I do think that there is a metaphysical, a symbolic homunculus, because that's also another thing. So now we get to the homunculus recipe, which is called a rational animal. And it starts off by saying, whoever wishes to make a rational animal should take his own water while warm. So take your own sperm and let him mix it with equal measure of stone that is called stone of the sun. This is a stone that shines at night like a lamp until the place in which it is found is illuminated. I am associating that with a meteorite. Okay, that's just my personal assessment because there are stories of Edward Kelly having this red powder of projection, which Edward Kelly was also one of the very few alchemists. He was actually the greatest alchemist, one of the greatest alchemists. And he's given this bad rep, right, because he took advantage of John Dee. Well, if you actually look into I've been meaning to put out this episode. If you look into the history of John Dee and Edward Kelly, it was actually the other way around. The one that was psychologically abusing Edward Kelly was John Dee. He would gaslight him, and he was the one that was driving Edward Kelly to insanity by doing seances up to 10 hours a day, every day, for extended periods of times. And so this red powder of projection, he used it in order to transmute base metals into gold. And he was one of the only alchemists that was able to do it in front of other people. That was the whole thing. You have Nicholas Flamel, you have all these other alchemists of antiquity who they say they achieved the magnum opus, but they never did it in front of anybody. It was always occulted. And Edward Kelly was one of the main ones. That's why he was imprisoned in Prague by Rudolf II, because he saw that he transmuted it, but when he ran out of the powder, which I believe was crushed up meteorite, he was never able to do it again. And that's why they weren't able to do it again, these alchemists of antiquity, because the stone at Mecca, which is said to be a meteorite, it was stolen at one point. And when they returned, it was, I believe, 60% smaller than it was originally. So what the story goes is that they chopped off a chunk, they powderized it, and they distributed that around the time, right, around Europe, wherever. And Kelly was able to get a hold of it, a hold of some. And until when he ran out of it, that's it. That's why they weren't able to recreate the transmutation. So that's what I think. In the place in which it is found is illuminated. So you think of a glowing meteorite. After this, you must take a cow or a ewe. Its vulva is cleansed with medicines and its womb made capable of receiving what is put in it. If a cow is used, the blood of the ewe is put on its vulva and vice versa. The orifice is then plugged with the stone of the sun. After this, the animal is put in a dark house. And every week it is given a pound of the other animal's blood to eat. One must then take some sunstone, as much sulfur, as much magnet, and as much green tudia. He should grind them, mix them with willow sap, and dry in the shadows. When the cow or sheep gives birth, one must here's where it comes, take that form and put that in that powder that you just finished making, for it will once be clothed in human skin. So this cow or ewe, sheep, whatever, gives birth to this gelatinous thing. And in some versions they say you need to shape it into a version of the man, right? Like 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. and then you put this powder on it and it grows skin. Well, this one just said you just put it as soon as it comes out, and it will once be clothed in human skin. Then it should be put into a great glass or lead vessel. After 3 days, it will become hungry and it will start to move around. So you have the traditional homunculus in the bottle, right? The little baby in a bottle. There it is. Therefore, feed it from the blood that has gone forth from the mother for 7 days. So you have the 3 days, which is symbolic. Then you have the 7 days, which is also symbolic, the number 7. Then the animal form that is agreeable to many miracles will be finished. This being can be used to change the course of the moon and change oneself into a cow or sheep. And if you take this form and feed it and nourish it for 40 days, there is another symbolic number, and feed it with the blood and milk, nothing else, and the sun does not see it, you may then vivisect it and use its fluids to anoint your feet, whereon you can walk over water. Finally, if a man has raised it and nourished it until a whole year passes and left it in milk and rainwater, will tell him all things that are absent. Now, I have this argument with Paranoid American where he believes this to be a recipe for mushrooms. But then I go, okay, I can see if you take enough mushrooms where you become Bigfoot, right? You can start seeing things. But then they take it so literally where you will walk on water, you can change the course of the moon, and then it gets kind of different because the next 2 experiments are essentially the same, except the matrix, the womb, is provided by a female monkey in one, and the third, the womb of an unidentified animal. So an anointment is made from the homunculus birth from the monkey, an ointment made from the eyes and brain, made from the homunculus that's birthed from the monkey, allows you to see spirits and demons, and drinking a brew made from its tongue allows you to talk to these entities. And this is the only part in this that is about demonic or spiritual or metaphysical entities. That's the only section. And there's a scholar that said, well, here, this is proof that this is creating an artificial demon. You can make that argument. But again, this is the only section. Using its liver makes trees bend over. Using its brain and the brain of a fresh human corpse on a dead tree can make it flourish instantly. Using the guts of the homunculus birthed by the unidentified animal can make you impervious to pain. Using its heart wrapped in the skin of its forehead makes you invisible. And burning powder made from its body can make it rain. And finally, if you bury this powder in the ground for 14 days, the powder will give birth to extremely poisonous snakes. So very, very weird. It could be symbolic. That's also a thing, but how specific, right? In order for it to be symbolic, very symbolic. When you read an alchemical text, it's, the green lion ate the sun, and the sun dissolved back into itself and threw itself back up, et cetera, et cetera. It's got a different feel to it when you're reading an alchemical text. So another set of experiments allows you to generate hybrid animals. So I think that they were trying to account for these mythological beings, the centaur, the minotaur, all these things. There is one with a cow with the face of a human, viper-like worms with horns and enormous eyes, bee-like worms, and a final animal that, if you use its fat as an ointment, you can permanently transform a person into a pig or an ape. And as the experiment progresses, it is a mixture of just more and more animal and human substances and mixtures of various matrices. And ultimately, these experiments are for the purpose of the magician to gain godlike powers. So we have this idea again. I use the leprechaun because I do consider it another sort of homunculus that leads the person, right? You chase it to the pot of gold for riches. And I think that's symbolic of alchemy. If you look at the story of creation for the Anunnaki, what did they create the Homo sapien for? To mine
gold.
Or gold. Yeah. So you have that connection again. Humans, Homo sapiens, are homunculus because they take the sperm and a matrix that is not, the Anunnaki woman, right? These giants. And they create men to mine for gold. In the story of Genesis, what are they doing? They're tilling the ground for Yahweh, for God, for El, for Buddha, for Vishnu, whoever you want to call him, to till the ground, right, for this God. and obviously they disobey God. The woman eats of the forbidden fruit, and they're aborted from the Garden of Eden. They are exiled from it. And that's what I relate all this to. You have Prometheus shaping man out of mud. Again, that's also another sort of homunculus. And nowadays there's technology to clone or edit DNA. We know this. And I didn't know, bro, until I started researching this, but the first human clone was created in November of 1998 by a company. And they say that the embryo was destroyed after 12 days, so they claim. But the chimera was half man, half cow. Okay? The word, the stuff that they made people get, right, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, comes from the word vacay, which is, again, the cow. Makes you think of the golden cow in the Bible.
Yeah.
Makes you think of why certain cultures don't eat cow and they worship them instead.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting that when you start to look at and connect all these dots of why this is something like that. But again, I'm just a researcher.
No, dude. Yeah, no, that's what's so interesting about this. There's a lot of ways to, I like the distinction, early part. You're saying basically there's kind of two different practitioners, people going, I don't know, you might even equate this to the left hand or right hand path or whatever, but, like natural magicians or natural physicians who use what's available and God's, earth or what have you. And then you've got this whole other do as thou wilt group who's just like, hey, let's
blasting
cut off some
everywhere.
dog dicks and smack around. I mean, and imagine the trial and error, you bury the guy for 13 days or 16 days and it turns into a fucking,
I need to be one more day. He's too overdone. He's well done now. He needed to be medium well.
We needed a Sasquatch and we got a Yeti. We're fucked,
exactly.
Man. This is not going to work. But yeah, I mean, just the specificity of all of that. And, I'll challenge a listener here to just think about this. Okay. Like, so 9th century problems you can find in the biggest dog dick. It's wild. We've been on this earth for a long fucking time. Just because we have the internet doesn't make us any more advanced than any other civilization that's ever been here before.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we think are ridiculous. And I mean, of course you read that and at first you're like, this has gotta be a troll, like, because it sounds so absurd, but we've been here, and like movies like The Island of Dr. Moreau, like that comes to my mind now, where that's just some crazy fucking weird scientist off on an island, and that's an old story. And he's taking animals and people and smushing them together. It's in a ton of movies.
Or The Fly, where he mixes his DNA with the fly, right? Like it makes you think, bro. Science fiction, I do believe, is another mechanism that occultists use to shroud their, right? The what is it when they put it out there? I'm drawing a blank. The method of the revelation of method, where they put it out there, right? It's part of the observer effect because the observer charges this talisman of a movie, of a sigil, of whatever it is you're subconsciously giving your energy to it. So these movies that they put out, it makes you question. The Avatar movie, like, what are they hinting at? They're putting their consciousness into these avatars, these blue. If you look at the symbolism of the blue, the tree of life, we're all interconnected, et cetera, et cetera. It makes you think, and it really starts to, and that's why a lot of people tell me, what can I read to learn all these things? And I go, well, just start off with the secret teachings of all ages. Because Manly P. Hall really has inspired me and has shown me a lot of things in my awakening. I hate using that word, but my awakening.
It is what it is. It's fine. I'm with you.
And I tell people, I go, if you don't enjoy that, then you're not going to enjoy the rest of it, because anything under that is just esotericism, back to the specifics. Like, there's magic, there's the left hand, right hand, and then you go like, well, these dudes like to blast their seed everywhere. These other dudes like to keep it in and like to use the magical power of keeping it in and the chi and all this stuff. And then, you know, you have the goetic magic, which, well, Corley said it was our subconscious doing all this stuff. Well, some other people say it's the key of the lesser key of Solomon. Like there's, you know, it's just specific. It's the same thing, just more specific. And that's why I tell people start with the tip. If you don't like the tip, that's you're not gonna like the rest of it, bro. But either way, back to the whole making this is an art, right? Researching is an art. And my favorite, I was always that kid in high school, bro, where I'd remember all the dates in history. You know, social study was my favorite. American history was my favorite subject. Even obviously looking back now, right, it's indoctrination. But I always had that photographic memory of learning names and dates. And once you start building that up and you start to build a mind palace and you understand how to work around that and you start to connect the dots. So I can give you all the books I've read. Now, if you're going to make all the connections, probably not, because it's just, again, hours and hours of research. Like at the beginning of that MK Ultra episode where Paranoid American brought out a stack of books and he's like, oh, I read this one, read this one, read this one. He's like, I haven't shown you all the other ones I read in order for this one episode. Right. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. That it's like, hey, we're putting in work, we're putting in the leg work. Right. Even if it's an obscure topic like this, you know, a lot of people take offense for some of the stuff that I've been said. I don't give a shit. I'm just here to talk about it because it's history, regardless of the fact it's history. Just because you don't care about it doesn't mean the next person won't. You know what I mean?
Dude, absolutely. And I think that's a big part of, at least for some of us, like our purpose. Like I'm a big fan of Dan Coe. He does like this idea of the one person business model. We've all kind of done that subconsciously without ever hearing that as a thing. But it's where you basically take whatever it is that you're curious or interested about, and then you fucking go deep on all of it, synthesize it all, and then present it to people and shortcut them and help them understand these connections. And that's what we've all been doing. And we've been, you know, freely just giving out all this information, which is awesome because, again, it's directly connected to our own curiosity, you know. So I encourage people to think for themselves and go where the research takes them, just as you've done, because you can find these things and I've never heard anybody else talking about this, you know, like it's those strange, bizarre, unique things.
Some people don't, bro. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah. And yeah, somebody else might read those same books and then their research would lead them to some other idea out of there. Right. Mm-hmm. They may find some really good connections and ideas. But that's really, you know, what we're trying to do is just share and sort of help to paint the tapestry that is reality. Like, how about some context? Because like you said, historically, we know in school, we certainly have been indoctrinated into this idea of history and only one story, not from different angles, right?
His story
is written by the winner, of course. It's like the John Dee thing. You know, which reminds me of the Tesla, you know, Edison thing, right? It's like, yeah, I'm going to steal all your shit, make you seem like an asshole, and I'm going to take all the glory because I have the power and I'm going to do that. So it's wild where this stuff goes. And yeah, I guess this whole tangent just was, you know, we've been on this earth for a long, long, long time. People have been fucking with shit for a long time. You go look at the Egyptian hieroglyphs and they are, you know, disemboweling dead bodies and doing things like that. And, you know, so there's as absurd and ridiculous as some of this stuff sounds, sometimes the more literal shit is, the more you like the obvious is unseen. You know, that is such a good thing to keep in mind, where it's like, I learned that when I was younger, somebody said that to me. We were like in a parking lot smoking weed or whatever. Just like the obvious is unseen. And it always stuck with me because sometimes when I go back through these things and just look at it very literally, I'm just like, oh, well, that's incredibly overt and in your face. Like that's, and I think we're naturally magical beings that we manifest. You know, if you take the whole like Anunnaki story, there's like Inky and whatever they're and they are fighting about, you know, how much magical powers to give the human being. And they gave us too much or whatever. Well, it doesn't matter if you gave us too much, if you hide the instruction booklet, right? Like then we don't know how to access it. But I think we are innately just intuitively like magical beings, right? Like we have these.
That's why people are so drawn to topics like this, because when you start talking about unlocking abilities or using things as talismans to invoke certain energy, they perk up and they go, oh, wow, I want to learn, right? It's like these YouTube videos like learn how to get rich in 5 steps. It's like, well, You think that if you were truly rich, you'd be on YouTube teaching other people how to do it? Probably not. It's like the gimmick is they get you to click that video so they make money off that video, and then when you listen to it, it's like the most generic shit, like put in work. It's like when they ask Kim Kardashian, it's like, what do you have to tell all the women that want to be their own boss or something? It's like, get up and work, bitch. Like, bro, what are you saying? Like, you literally became rich through what I believe is sex magic, like a freaking sex video. You know what I'm saying?
She stole Paris Hilton's model, right? And just replicated it. Yeah, absolutely, man. 100%. Like, and a lot of the folks, and I didn't even know this when I started making videos and shit on YouTube. I was just trying to help people share information. But like all this shit is like thought of and strategized. It's like the 3 ways to do this or whatever. And then we get a dopamine hit from watching it as if we did the thing and we didn't get out and work, bitch, you know? So, you know, like that is a very wise thing. But I mean, you know, of course, to get out there and do the thing, but like that's part of that trap is like you just get sucked into this, and conspiracy can be this way too. You know, I've been sucked into the sort of pendulum or the even the victim mindset. Oh no, you know, woe is me. You know, you can kind of get stuck in that loop. You know, I think when you're taking initiative and doing your own research, now you're following your curiosity. Curiosity leads to information, passion, purpose,
that magical system. Yeah,
that is pure magic, right? And that is part, I think, of self-actualization. When you're going out there and you're finding the information that you're truly curious about is genuine. Well, now you're, you know, acting on your authentic impulses, and then you're finding the information, you know, bringing that back and telling it in a story. And then now here we are, you know, fulfilling that role, right? Which is dope.
Well, what if I told you that the decisions that you're making is because you have a homunculus in your brain? There's a little man right now inside your brain that's looking at what you're watching. And another, I'm going to go through some of the definitions of homunculus. So according to Daddy Paracelsus, which is the one that is like the pinnacle, this is the guy that brought the homunculus into the mainstream in the 16th century. The homunculus is, quote, an image or figure of a small man with every limb and shape like a man. It is based on the idea that the external shape and form of an object reveals its internal properties and powers. Thus, the homunculus, as an image of man, possesses all abilities and powers of man. I was saying these hidden powers, for a hidden human nature is concealed in a spiritual way. Very, very eloquent and very beautifully put. It is thus possible for this image to perform all operations of man completely. Well, back to Vitruvius and the Vitruvian man, right? That everybody knows and loves. There's a reason why they designed all these cathedrals and buildings of antiquity after the shape of man. And I believe it's linked back to this, where they believed it invoked certain powers in these buildings that were used as talismans. Back then, the architect was magician. I have an episode coming out next week on the architect as magician. And I interview a professor, a doctor that wrote a book about it, where, again, the stylus of an architect is the wand. Right. And there are certain energies that an architect puts into their work to invoke certain energies. And I think that they were trying to emulate the perfect form, the man. And I'm not saying that as a sexist, but again, the shape of a human, right? Not a man, whatever. Sure. You get the point.
Right.
But that's Paracelsus, essentially a simulacra of a man or person made of earth, wax, or metal. So back to the voodoo doll, a doll or effigy. I'm sure everyone has seen the voodoo doll, which is what I mentioned at the beginning. Another definition, an artificial human created by magic. A homunculus does the bidding of its creator. You have the golem, you have the Frankenstein's monster, and you have AI, which is, again, another form of homunculus. Because, again, this idea evolves. It's not just tied to a small little man. There's also a femunculus, which is a small woman. So you have these ideas. In psychology, we have something called, what I mentioned, the homunculus argument. And it comes from a theory called Cartesian theater, because back then they were trying to find out, like, hey, how are we seeing what we're seeing? How are we interpreting what we're seeing right now? Well, perfect. There's a small version of you inside of your head that's watching you through your ears, a screen, and they're watching everything that you're seeing. Well, wait a minute. Who's inside that small person's head? Oh, another homunculus.
Oh, fuck.
But then who's inside of that one? Well, it's homunculus all the way down ad infinitum. So instead of turtles all the way down, no, it's homunculus all the way down. There's a nebula named the Homunculus Nebula, and there's another homunculus inside of that homunculus. And I have a theory, Owen. I think that the community is so divided between flat Earth, globe Earth, spiritual realm, whatever. I have a theory, bro. I think it is asshole Earth, because there's the Phallus Nebula that fucks the asshole Earth, and they birth new nebulas and worlds into existence. That's my theory. So while everybody's arguing about flat Earth and all this stuff, you gotta look above. The toroid field. What does that look like? Exactly. Look into that. That's a rabbit hole. So. Wow. In neuroanatomy, you have the cortical homunculus, the cortex, man, which is, I'm sure you've seen it, where it's if you Google homunculus, the first thing that's going to come up, it's like this model with like big lips and big hands. And it's a neurological map of the brain and what it controls in the body. And there's a movie called Homunculus on Netflix, right? Of course, Netflix. It came out last year. There you go. That's the cortex, man. And it's a neurological map. And Netflix came out with a movie, I think it was this year, I'm pretty sure it's 2022, called Homunculus. And this was before I was researching the homunculus. It came after I was started researching the homunculus. And the movie is about this man who, it's based off a manga, where they drill a hole in his head here, right? The third eye, the chakra, whatever. And he's able to see homunculi. But homunculi are actually like demons that attach themselves to people. And they affect them in a certain type of way. And he's able to see these traumas that are bothering people and attach to them. And he's able to essentially extract them from them. But there's a plot twist. They attach themselves to him. And the movie's kind of dark because there's like rape and stuff in it. So if you're... I'm not cool with rapists. If you're a rapist, fuck you. But
yeah,
there's
wood
that
chipper.
type of yeah. So again, I'm just pointing that out for those that don't want to see it, because it actually is a good movie aside from that part.
I watched the trailer this morning. It's like a Korean movie or something.
Yes, it's really interesting. And then we have the Alchemical Homunculus, which was the 16th century, that revolves around the philosophical art of alchemy. A magical process of transformation, creation, or of creation and combination. And the alchemical homunculus is this small little artificially created person that was rumored to be created by these alchemists of antiquity. And all of this comes from, bro, these ideas. Yeah, that's the traditional alchemical homunculus. You have the little baby in a vessel,
test tube baby.
You said it, not me, but test tube baby, pretty much. That's another iteration of. I've had people hit me up, hey, I'm a homunculus because I was born in a test tube. So these ideas come from Aristotelian biology. So Aristotle was inspired by Pythagoras. Pythagoras was actually the one that came up with eugenics, and that's why in Plato's Republic there's this idea of selective breeding between different people, because Plato was taking his inspiration from Pythagoras. And what I mean to say by all that is that these minds of antiquity are affecting or have affected our modern day, right? These minds of the year 200, 300, whatever, from hundreds of years ago, we're still using their ideas today. So how you're saying, just because we got computer screens and all this other stuff doesn't make us any much more advanced. I think that if anything, we've regressed, because we literally have more information. Like as these seconds are counting right now, we have more information than you have ever had literally at the disposal of your fingertips right now than history has ever had. But imagine all the things that we've lost, bro, in the burning of Alexandria.
Oh my God.
And all these, the destruction, the elaborate destruction of ancient civilizations and their texts and all these things, that because of his story, because they're trying to paint a certain picture, all the things that we've lost because of that, because of people who've destroyed relics. And what was the first thing that Hitler did? He started destroying galleries and shutting down art schools and things of that nature because, again, they understood that art has a certain effect on the psyche. It speaks to the soul. And back then, reproduction was viewed from two different angles: spontaneous generation and sexual generation. In spontaneous, you get A plus B equals C. You allow them to putrefy. The putrefaction is a big role in all this because I mentioned earlier you let it sit for 40 days. Back then they saw a rotting piece of meat that they had left on the ground. It's pure observation. They came back, a couple of days later, boom, you had larvae. You had maggots. And then from that, well, you had flies. Okay? Well, when the chicken lays on the egg, she's simply warming it up so that it putrefies. And from that putrefaction, you get a baby chick. That's the way that they were thinking back then, bro. They also believed in preformationism, which is any big thing in nature exists in a small version of itself. So before microscopes, they believed that a sperm was actually a little man inside of the sperm like this. Look up preformationism and you'll see the illustration of the man in the sperm. This is what they believed back then. And Aristotle thought that his theory of sexual generation was that every material substrate must contain matter and form. The two forms are sperm and menstrual blood. So there you go. That's preformationism, where they thought that the one where he's crouched down, where he's got his knees to his chest. Excuse me.
How is that it?
No, the one next to it. The other one.
Oh, this
there
one.
You go. That one. Yeah. That's preformationism. And they believe that was a small little man inside the sperm. And at coitus, there was a battle between the menstrual blood and the sperm. And if the sperm won, you'd have a boy. And if the menstrual blood won, you'd have a girl.
Interesting.
That's what they thought. Okay. These guys were, again, a products of their time. And Aristotle states, because they were misogynists too. And I don't know why, because women are beautiful, bro. Like, I don't, you can't live with them. You can't live without them. But they're beautiful nonetheless. So these guys were like, no, I can beat myself off. I can do that all myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need women. Women are just incubators. That's their words, not mine.
The original. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Aristotle states females are weaker and colder in their nature than males. And we should look upon the female state as being, as it were, a deformity because of the absence of the sexual appendage. This further proved that women lacked perfection. So they thought because women didn't have penises that they lacked perfection, right? Which,
well, if he could be alive today,
yeah, if you could be alive today, brother. And if anything, soon, my second head has gotten me in more trouble than I can count. So I think that is not a good argument. I think
it's more of a liability, frankly.
100%, bro. 100%. I think men are sometimes pigs and they can't control themselves. And I say that because I'm a man. So Aristotle, although he mentioned all these things, did not believe that human beings could be born without both parents. But there's always that Florida man that said, well, Daddy Aristotle said all these things. Well, let's cut women out of the picture and let's just jerk off into test tubes and see what happens. So, but it was because Aristotle gave sperm this like supernatural power. Wow. The giants of back then jizzed on everything, and that's how you get these mountains and these mythological, the Titans and all these things, right? So his followers were like, okay, let's take this with open hands. And I want to go back to the 2nd century before Common Era up to the 8th century. There's something called Taoism or Taoism. It's internal alchemy. The Chinese practiced it. And there's this idea. I don't know if you ever read The Secret of the Golden Flower.
I don't know that book. I'm familiar with Taoism for sure.
So look up the secret. I mean, not now, but if whenever you have time, it's a short read. Secret of the Golden Flower. And it talks about, in this book, it talks about this immortal spirit body of gold formed inside of your solar plex. And the way that you're able to make this happen, because back again to the semen retention or the expelling of your semen, you have these two different practices. Well, a lot of these monks, right, they practice celibacy. Well, it's for a reason. It's because they believe that by you keeping your semen inside of yourself, you're able to manifest things better.
Yeah. It's charging energy. It's your chi.
Exactly. Yeah. But that reasoning came from the preformationists, where if I'm a divine being, me man, and my sperm is full of other divine beings, right? Little versions of myself, and inside of them there's other little versions of themselves. Well, I'm like the seventh son of the seventh son. Let me just keep it inside and use that energy to manifest things magically in this realm. So they come up with the idea of there's an outward flowing energy constantly from us. And by you meditating and doing breathing and breath work, after 100 days or so, once you're able to reverse the light in on itself, right? So reverse that energy flow by meditation. Eventually inside of your body, this fluid, your sperm, everything else is going to crystallize into a golden body. And it's going to become alive. It's going to become, and it's going to detach itself, and it's going to be its own entity, its own living entity. And the purpose of this little golden man is to allow you to escape samsara, for you not to reincarnate again. So it's this little golden being that's going to exist once you're dead. It's going to exist in the ether, whatever it's literal or not, I don't know. It's going to exist, and it's going to allow you to escape the Ouroboros and reincarnation, so you don't have to come back again. And this is what these guys were all about. They were about, I'm trying to find the verse. I can't find it. But anyways, you get the point. They would reverse the energy, and they would use it to escape reincarnation. And that was their way out of the matrix, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, I can totally 100% see that. I think that's a lot of the Eastern teachings, to sum up, right? Like if you wanted to, that we are constantly reincarnating, and the only way to, escape samsara is to find that I guess creative power, self-actualize. I don't know. There's a bajillion, reach enlightenment, whatever. There's so many different terms for it.
And this is where the homunculus starts to evolve. That's why I wanted to put it out, because that, internal alchemy, it's dated back to 2nd BCE, 8 BC, so 2,000 years ago. The stuff that I just finished reading about Aristotle, well, it's from Aristotle's time up into the 18th century. Well, this came before that. So this concept of a little person, little man, little creature has been around for a long time. And they just took that, and again, they try to androgynize it, because people are going to relate to what they see, what they perceive. So what better way than to put a human face on it? Well, let's make it, instead of this golden being, let's make it a little man in order to relate to it, right? It's like, again, it goes back, there's an evolution, and we're going to see that.
Interesting.
And I want to talk about Zosimos of Panopolis real quick. The first mention of a homunculus, right? The first mention in an alchemical text was from Zosimos from the 3rd and beginning of the 4th century AD. And he wrote the oldest literature known on alchemy. And he is essentially, it's called On Virtue or Visions of Zosimos, and you can look it up. And he is pretty much having a dream. It's almost like Dante's Inferno type thing, where he's going through this hellscape. And eventually he encounters this, I believe he was a priest in a vessel. And these descriptions are metals going through a transformation, but he starts off by saying, and as he was saying these things and I was pressing him to talk, his eyes became like blood, and he vomited forth his flesh. And I saw him change into a mutilated anthroparion, which is another word for homunculus, biting himself and wounding himself with his own teeth. Seized with fear, I thought, is it not thus that the composition of the waters is produced? And I was convinced that I had understood well. Again, very cryptic. These guys are writing in symbols because they did not want to be killed or burned at the stake.
Mm-hmm.
So this anthroparion is what some scholars have termed a pseudo homunculus. For Zosimos, he was a follower of Hermes Trismegistus. He was alchemy was much more of an art. It was a philosophical and religious experience, and right, the Gnostics believe that we're in this prison body with this flesh suit, and by following the practice of alchemy, you're able to distill and purify matter from its dark attributes. So they hoped, right, these alchemists of antiquity, that to remove the impurity of matter, the goal was to resurrect the material world through alchemy. So that's what the followers of Zosimos and alchemy at the time believed. And one of the people that I quoted here, Fulcanelli, which is a more modern alchemist, right? This
very, very well known, notable for sure.
The cross-dressing alchemist, as I like to call him. Because that's also another part of the alchemical magnum opus. You become this androgynous being. You exist outside the space and time, and you become just an ascended master is what I believe, right? You have this immortal alchemist, which I've talked about. So and this is Fulcanelli, the secret of alchemy is this. There is a way of manipulating matter and energy as to produce what modern scientists called a field of force. The field acts on the observer and puts him in a privileged position vis-a-vis the universe. From this position, he has access to realities which are ordinarily hidden from us by time and space, matter and energy. This is what we call the great work. So Fulcanelli is talking about, again, this because there's a practical side of alchemy and there's a spiritual. Well, by doing the practical, you're able to unlock pretty much a portal of some sorts to step outside the boundaries of reality and be able to affect reality on a much deeper level. And I think that's what these occulted circles are trying to take away from the modern, from the regular layman person, right? That's why it's secret societies and all these things, is they don't want you to learn about these things. They don't want you to see in the book of Enoch that after the angels told Enoch all the secrets, he became Metatron, bro. He fucking became this holder of reality and was able to change its course and all this. Not a god. I don't know. He became an overseer, if you will. This guy was just there to care for reality. And I think that's what they're trying to withhold from us. The alchemist seeks to strip bare the world's secrets, to break it down to its building blocks and rearrange them. I love that. And I love that quote by Fulcanelli because it really paints a picture of, a lot of people ask, well, what is alchemy? Well, it's a lot of things. But the way I like to look at it is, I think it's a cheat code for the Matrix, bro. It's a cheat code to be able to break out of it. And I think that's what Pythagoras was talking about when he said all is number. If all is number, it's all binary code. If it's all binary code, then it's a program. And if there's a program, there's a programmer, there's an architect. And that's where the term watcher comes from, because they're watching God at work. Change reality, create new universes. They're watching him. So that's alchemy in a nutshell. And that's my favorite interpretation of alchemy. And we have Jabir bin Hayyan, 8th century Persian sage. And this guy is the one that created the acid that goes in your battery for your car. The father of modern chemistry. Not just some Joe Schmo hillbilly redneck in the desert of Arabia or whatever at this point. Maybe so, but he was a very smart redneck, and he was talking about this is the guy that created what I call, I'm trying to find my text. This guy created a homunculus rotisserie machine is what I called it. And he talked about how to create different versions of a homunculus based on this mold. So it was this machine with concentric half circles. So if you think about, I forgot the name of the machine, but you've ever seen those globes that have all these weird things around them that just spin around?
Like kaleidoscopes or?
Almost like a kaleidoscope or like a gyroscope or something, where it's like a bunch of half circles, concentric circles just spinning around. This guy talked about making a mold. and the mold had different shapes and different sizes, and depending on the size and shape, you'd get a different homunculus. But this guy talked about, hey, any other homunculus is demonic, right? This guy wrote more than 3,000 works. His books were translated. More than 70 of his books were translated into other languages. And he wrote instructions on how to recreate products of nature, such as precious metals, stones, plants, animals, and you guessed it, man. And this comes from the idea of takwin, which is the goal of certain Muslim alchemists. Takwin refers to the creation of artificial life in a laboratory up to and including human life, the most notable being Jabir bin Hayyan. So this guy said it starts off with the sperm. You put it in various molds and seal it up in a perforated vessel that can be heated up and left to putrefy. One thing that differentiates Hayyan's work from the others is that he created an apparatus with concentric half spheres in which you were to place the mold inside of the homunculus rotisserie machine that is supposed to mimic the cosmic system. And depending on the shapes and size of the molds, determine the outcome of the homunculus. They vary from a young girl with a boy's face to an adolescence with the intelligence of a man. And Hayyan's work goes on to describe different schools. So if a guy wanted to make a man with wings like the one that you saw on there, well, he took man's sperm, mixed it with the sperm or blood of a bird, and boom, you had a winged homunculus. So these ideas, again, started to evolve of like, oh, I want to make something different. Let's step it up. Let's crank it up to 10. And then we're going to start creating all these crazy monsters. Jabir writes in his Book of Stones that the purpose is to baffle and lead into error everyone except those whom God loves and provides for. So you have this idea of people who criticize it. That's fine. I'm only here to God's chosen people that are going to understand what I'm doing. But obviously you can see where the heretical and blasphemous things come into play there.
Sure.
The book was written cryptically, and only those who had the key or were initiated in the art of alchemy understood it to its full potential. Again, back to this initiation aspect. You need to understand, you need to have the keys in order to know what he's talking about. These texts can be taken literally or can be interpreted symbolically. We will never truly know for sure. Scholar Kathleen Malone O'Connor writes, from the emic perspective of the alchemist, the act known as the act of Takwin was an emulation of the divine, creative, and life-giving powers of Genesis and resurrection, and tapped the physical and spiritual forces in nature. At the same time, it was an act through which the alchemist was inwardly transformed and purified, a spiritual regeneration. So the phoenix, right? This regenerational, the rebirth, the cycle. Such an act highlights the creative and often uneasy interrelationship of Islamic magic and science with Islamic revelation and tradition. And it just sort of disturbs me to know that these great minds of antiquity were messing in what's today known as the occult. I mean, there's no other way to put that. They were practicing the occult, but just like John Dee put a scientific approach on it. No, this is science. We're doing a psychological warfare on you. You need to get this one thing that they pushed on us. And you know how many people have reached out to me saying, wow, I regret that. It's one of the biggest things I regret ever in my life. And I go, hey, your reality, your perception was warped through what I believe was magic. Absolutely. To shut everybody else out of your life, to shun everybody, to be nasty to everybody around in your life. Because of something that, what's the 7 most dangerous words or 9 most dangerous words, whatever it is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I'm pretty sure a president said that.
It was
Reagan.
Reagan, yeah.
Who was also a lover of Manly P. Hall.
Mm. So, well, he was an actor, right? So he was initiated into that Hollywood sort of world, at least at some level. I mean, for God's sake, he was a president, so who knows what all. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get off on tangents, but
yeah, I mean, again, very, very weird. And the next one, speaking of language and warping realities, we have what some would argue is not a homunculus, but it's a form of a homunculus because Paracelsian scholar Walter Pagel argues that the story of the homunculus may have been the predecessor of the homunculus of Paracelsus, the Paracelsian homunculus. But the golem is more of an automata, and you can relate it to the world of robotics, AI, etc., cybernetics. The golem of Jewish literature was a man brought to life by means of religious magic. In the Talmud, Adam was a golem. He was created from the dirt, and he was animated. The Golem of Prague, which is my personal favorite and one of the more famous stories, and the reason that I relate is because it's related to Jack Parsons, which I've done an episode on. Because Jack Parsons' mentor at Galset boasted about being a descendant of Judai Rabbi Low, the famous rabbi that created the Golem of Prague in order to guard the ghettos from Rudolph II that was anti-Semitic and it was killing the Jews. So the story goes that he brings forth this animated being from the ground, and the word emet, meaning truth, was written on the golem's forehead. And every Sabbath, in order to let the golem rest, the E would be erased to form met, meaning death. But one night, the rabbi forgot to erase that letter. So the golem, in some stories, he grew bigger and bigger, started killing everybody, went on a rampage like a Hulk. And eventually the rabbi was able to erase it, and the golem was able to die. In some stories, he crushes the rabbi and kills him. In other stories, not so.
That's Frankenstein.
There is parallels to it. Eventually, Rabbi Low was notified. They subdued him, and it was stored in the attic of a synagogue. But the story is about more of the power that the language has, the Hebrew language, the powers that it holds, right? Because when we spell, we're casting spells back again to the grimoire.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm very careful with what I say. So this brings me to my next topic on the idea of there is always the idea, not saying I'm advocating for it, but of destroying your homunculus, of dissecting the homunculus, of killing it in order to achieve a magical purpose. Now, these are not my ideas. These are ideas of a 15th century theologian. And this really triggers the fuck out of people, but here it is. Jesus as the homunculus. Now,
wow, that's fun.
When I say that I've been down some rabbit holes,
man, you're not joking, bro.
I've been down rabbit holes that require you to purchase books that aren't available online, that are sometimes expensive, that in order to get one piece of information from that one page. So I had done an episode one time with this before we started thinking about doing homunculus. Once upon a time, probably about a year ago, with Romy, and Romy was like, well, Jesus is probably a homunculus. And I go, dude, you can't be saying stuff like that on air without citing your sources, bro. That's a crazy ass idea, bro. It turns out homie Romy from Rising from the Ashes podcast was right all along, because little did I know that there was a 15th century theologian, Alonso Tostalo, who argued with the church saying like, hey, why is the Bible not considered a grimoire? Well, because it's a religious text. It just intrinsically is magical. That's interesting. Why can you practice from a grimoire and then we can't? It doesn't matter. It's just the way that God works. It's just the way that, God works in mysterious ways. You can't question that. So this guy was questioning the paradoxes of the church, and he was a writer and was writing about the paradoxes of like, hey, in this story you said this, but then in this other story you said this other thing. What's going on here? And he was questioning the hierarchy and the church, and he proposed that Mary was a sealed vessel. Again, a variation from the traditional homunculus. There was no sperm, but she did have menstrual blood and a womb, the matrix. And although Tostalo argued that Mary would not have enough blood for the full development, he said, well, she had enough blood for it to develop in a condensed version. Well, what's the condensed version of a man? Well, a small man. So, at conception, according to Aristotelian, if you follow Aristotelian biology and Paracelsian alchemical doctrines, Jesus was conceived as a homunculus. A miniature human kept in a sealed vessel from the first instant of creation. But then there was this other guy, Thomas Aquina. He said, no. He was a doctor of the church, theologian. He said, no. There was no need for sperm because the Holy Spirit is that powerful. The Holy Spirit is able to animate matter from nothingness. So therefore, Jesus is not an alchemical homunculus. No, he is just our Messiah, our Savior. So you have these two schools of thought back then, which, again, you can take that for what it is. I do believe in God. I have accepted Jesus in my life. I was born and raised Pentecostal Christian. I just do not adhere to the dogmatic and psychological warfare that they do at the church. And that's where I stand with that. Because I'll be, oh, well, you said that Jesus is a homunculus, so you must worship Satan. Oh, absolutely not. I am merely a vessel for this information. And it's not my idea. It's a 15th century theologian. I'm studying history right now. I'm not making this up. You can look them up yourself. Alonso Tostado and Thomas Aquina. Look them up. You're going to get a set of books that's like $2,500. You can buy them if you want. You can look through them. And you can make your own assumption. So it's like people accuse you of being this heretical. And because I like heretical and blasphemous shit because it's fun. But... essentially, Aquina, Tostado didn't want the matrix, the womb, women, because birth is a beautiful thing, to be like the legitimacy of it to be stripped away, because, you know, he saw it as a beautiful thing. He's like, okay, you know, women are beautiful, creation is beautiful. I don't want to demean the womb. So in medieval art, to fortify this idea, there are paintings of Jesus as, right, the baby and Madonna, as the literal term, the literal definition of homunculus, as a little man. And the reasoning behind that is in the, I want to say 15th century. Go look up 15th century man, baby Jesus, I guess. I forgot what I looked. I have some pictures somewhere. I can pull them up. But the reasoning behind their depiction of Jesus as a homunculus, the literal definition, was because they said, hey, this is the Messiah. This is our Savior. No one's going to take a baby seriously. You can't have a baby as the Savior of our universe.
I'm flashing back to Talladega Nights, bro.
Yeah, bro.
I can't help it. I mean,
you can't. So we need to give him some, let me see, some prestige. Let's draw him with a little scroll, with his hair done in a little robe. And yeah, you draw him with a 6-pack. Yeah, you want to put a 6-pack on? Yeah, give him some 5 o'clock shadow. Give him some more credibility, if you will. And some painters took it seriously, bro. They took it literally, and they said, hey, you know, in some religious iconography, baby Jesus holds objects alluding to his eternal wisdom and knowledge. In Burling Heroes, Madonna and Child painting in the 13th century, baby Jesus is a tiny philosopher. He wears an ancient robe, holds a scroll, and has the face of a man with years of philosophical experience. I'm going to send you this name so you can Google it here in the private chat. So you can pull up the picture of so that's the guy's name, Burling Heroes. And he painted a bunch of different ones, and they're really ugly too, by the way. I just want to add that, because you think that you're painting one of the most important figures of history of you know, arguably all time, and you're gonna paint him so ugly. So Google him real quick and see if you can come up with. If not, I have the pictures I can pull up too.
yeah, there's a bunch. I just did a quick search too. Yeah, let's look through a couple of these, because
it's a real thing, bro. It's not like people think
wild.
that you pull these things. It's like, I'm a researcher, bro. Like, I can. There you go, bro. He's got a little scroll in his.
Dude, look at this one. This one is hilarious. Look at that. Look at him.
Yeah, bro.
Like, he's got a little
full set of hair.
Yeah, that's a man's face for sure. Yep. He's just wearing a little tiny. I mean, to think about this tiny man doing all these exploits now and preaching and stuff, and somebody like holding him up, it recontextualizes things in a pretty fun way.
Bro. Again, and this is history, dude. This is actual history, and there's a bunch of those different ones.
Yeah,
see, so possibly 1230s, dude.
Yeah, that's insane.
Look at the one right there. Look at the one that you just were hovering over. How creepy is that? The pin, the
Which
pin, the one over to the right, right. Right, that one, that one, that
Oh
one.
God, yes.
Look at that
Oh my
one.
God. Yeah, that's weird.
Look at that's a full. Look, he's got freaking male pattern baldness on the top. He's got a receding hairline on that one, bro. What is happening?
Oh,
So
yeah.
literally, the definition of homunculus, little man. That is what it is. There,
That's
he is
crazy.
a little man, not an alchemical one. A little man.
That's a Russian. That's a Russian painting.
There you go, bro. So Russian
Wild.
again. This is all, dude. There's a I'm telling you, dude, rabbit hole for days. There's one that looks like Joe Rogan. He's ripped, bro. Let me see if you can find it. He's ripped.
That's so funny.
It's in one of these. You could sit there and look for hours, but
God, no, these are nuts, dude. I mean, absolutely crazy. I mean, this is the main sort of one right here. It looks like, the first one that we showed is that one. But I mean, yeah, like even that's portrayed. That's a teeny tiny man holding a scroll, just as you said.
So Jesus as the homunculus is not can be taken out of context, right? Because when people think of a homunculus, they think of the alchemical version of a homunculus, which is the popularized 16th century, but it goes much deeper than that, which we'll get to now, because this brings us to the Paracelsian homunculus, which is Paracelsus. His name was Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, and he shortened that to Paracelsus. He was a 16th century German-Swiss physician and alchemist who established the role of chemistry in medicine. He was also a surgeon, so a lot of the things that we attribute to surgery comes from this guy. Now, this guy deserves a whole episode on his own. You can attribute an entire episode on this guy. And if you want to read a good book, which I got some of my source information from, The Devil's Doctor. I mean, that's all. Okay, it's about over 300 pages. You can do a whole episode on him. It's by Philip Ball. Yeah, I can get in there. Paracelsus in the World of Renaissance Magic and Science. And you can read about Paracelsus. Now, Paracelsus was a very eccentric, weird guy. The guy was probably a homunculus. He was 5'2", had a deformed skull, had wide hips, and he hated women. Some stories say that he was gay. Some stories say that he was a hermaphrodite. Some stories say that he was castrated. There's a lot of different stories, but this is the typical, the archetype of the mad scientist comes from Paracelsus. The cranky old wizard that's in his cave. These guys' clothing would become discolored from the heat of their furnaces, from all the hours that they spent working in their alchemical labs, trying to literally mix their shit with their piss and everything together, trying to find the philosopher's stone. That's what it's all about, bro.
It's Jankum this whole time, the philosopher's stone.
These guys were literally there. If you look at grimoires like the Picatrix, which is one of the more famous grimoires, it literally, nothing is off the table. Your toenail clippings, your pubic hair, your excrement, your pee, everything is used. Your sweat, everything is used for a magical purpose. One of my favorite ones is not in the Picatrix, but I believe it was by Jabir bin Hayyan, where you use the water of a woman from the ass. That is, so when a woman is washing her ass, facing to the east or something like that, the water that runs off her ass, you take that water and you do something with it, and it does some magical thing like that. That's specific, bro. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, it got to that point. It's like the booty water of some chick.
Booty, and then you start at OnlyFans and you get fucking rich as fuck. Let's go.
Right? Like a magical OnlyFans, you sell booty water, gives you eternal wisdom. Yeah. I did. I make fun of Mark from my family thinks I'm crazy for drinking kombucha, because I'm like, dude, you're You're drinking homunculus water, bro. Like there's like worms and stuff in that. He's like, no, they're not worms, bro. It's only from the canned ones, dude. Like he gets so mad when I bring. He's like, I stopped drinking kombucha because of you, dude. And I'm like, hey, bro, you're drinking homunculus water. And don't blame the messenger, dude. I'm just telling you science. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So this guy is the father of toxicology. He's contributed a lot to modern medicine, and he's the one that wrote The Dose Makes the Poison. So because of this guy, Paracelsus, because of him is if you get too little bit of morphine, it does nothing. If you get too much of morphine, you fucking die. So this guy was like, hey, just the right amount works. So I imagine this guy in his lab and drinking tinctures, like how the Chinese alchemists of Taoism were drinking mercury and dying from mercury poisoning because they were trying to live forever. Right? They were doing anything possible to extend their life. That transhumanistic agenda that we see today, trying to live forever, immortality, the elixir of life. You can literally look up Jeff Bezos' elixir of life. This is modern day alchemy. They're looking for the philosopher's stone, essentially. Again, go back to this idea. And this is not science fiction. I think to them it's a real thing, and they know this. But hey, let's go ahead and demonize it in the historical books. These guys were crazy. You know, they were just mixing their boiling their piss and mixing their poop into stuff. Right? They were just crazy. And Paracelsus was the epitome of that. He was the cranky old man, walked around with a cane or a sword or something like that, and there are stories about how one time he admitted to being gay, and there was another story where they saw him naked, and they saw what they say because they uncovered this guy's skeleton and they did tests on it. And they said that he might have had some sort of disease where he would have had a huge clit and lips that looked like a small ball sack. So that's why people had this. That's why he hated women, right? And the idea that when they saw him, they go, he's castrated. Look at his little penis, and he's castrated. And it wasn't that. He was actually a woman. Again, you can read all about this on the internet. That's just a conspiracy about Paracelsus. And so Paracelsus was the one that coined the term homunculus. And he believed it was the pinnacle of man's creative power. The idea that man could become God. And in 1572, physician Adam von Bodenstein published a book that was supposedly based off of the work of Paracelsus. So some scholars call it a pseudo-Paracelsian text. Some say, hey, this is legit. Again, it's up to you. De Natura Rerum, the nature of things. And in this book, there's an argument that things are created by means of nature without art and with the aid of art. That art being spagyrics or alchemy. And he's the one that brought forth the argument of the egg. The chicken sits on the egg to putrefy the gelatinous thing inside the egg, right? The yolk and everything else. And from that putrefaction comes life. So from death comes life, where you have the phoenix, the rebirth. With the introduction of the homunculus, the book then states how the unnatural union of man with beast also produces offspring, though not without heresy. So he understood what he was doing. And this guy was a really religious guy, or being, whatever story you want to believe. Something that he goes on to dub a monster. An example of a Paracelsian monster, because he believed that the only place that your seed needs to go is in the womb of a woman. It's strictly procreation. You can't use your seed for anything else. Just the idea of getting blue balls will rot you from the inside out, Owen. So the only way to combat that is to get castrated. There's no way around it. If you have your balls intact and you even have a lustful thought towards a woman, towards anybody else, you will rot from the inside out. So we need to cut your balls off. That's how radical this guy was. This guy was doing public book burnings on other physicians that didn't agree with him.
Jesus.
This guy was a radical. I'm telling you, this guy is really, really eccentric, really crazy. So he created something known as a basilisk, which is a monster. and it's made from the menstrual blood of a woman, sealed up in a flask and heated to the temperature of a horse's womb. The basilisk is considered the monster above all monsters because, and I'm quoting, because its glance can kill just like the glance of a menstruating woman who also has a hidden poison in her eyes. So this guy's talking about how bad women's glances are and can ruin mirrors with her gaze, make wounds impossible to heal, and spoil wine with her breath. The basilisk was the embodiment of women's impurities and their poisonous essence. This guy was a misogynist. He hated women. His words, not mine. And after explaining how to create a basilisk, it describes in length the homunculus and how to create one, which is essentially the masculine opposite of homunculus. It is the perfected version because it comes from the sperm, not from the menstrual blood. It's not tainted by the menstrual blood. This is what he thought. So we must now by no means forget the generation of homunculi. Boom. This is the first drop, bro, ever of the homunculus. Oh, everybody's like, oh, shit. A homunculus, what is that? This is the first time he ever says it. For there is something to it, although it has been kept in great secrecy and kept hidden up to now, and there was not a little doubt and question among the old philosophers whether it even be possible to nature and art that a man can be born outside the female body and without a natural mother. I give this answer that it is by no means opposed to the spagyric art and to nature, but that it is indeed possible. But how this should happen and proceed, its process is thus. So he's going to explain how to create the homunculus. Boom. That the sperm of man be putrefied by itself in a cucurbit for 40 days with the highest degree of putrefaction in a horse's womb, or at least so long that it comes to life and move itself and stirs, which is easily observed. After this time, it will look somewhat like a man, but transparent without a body. If after this it is fed wisely with the acronym of human blood, it can be nourished for up to 40 weeks and kept in the even heat of a horse's womb. A living human child grows therefrom, with all its members like another child, which is born of a woman, but much smaller. So the homunculus is supposed to be pure since it was not tainted by the poisonous mixture of the menstrual blood. And the homunculus, according to Paracelsus, that reaches adulthood, and this is, again, cryptids can be attributed to this, mythological creatures. A homunculus that reaches adulthood is said to become a marvelous being like a giant or a dwarf. They have supernatural strength, and they know all things hidden and secret things. They received, and the reason for this being is like, why is this magical being? Why is a homunculus so powerful? Well, the reason for that being is because they received their life from art. Remember, we talked about art earlier. Through art, excuse me. Try that again. They receive their life from art. Now, the lizard people don't want me to say this. Through art, they receive their body, flesh, bone, and blood. Through art, they are born, and therefore art is embodied and inborn in them, and they need learn it from no one. So he saw the homunculus as the pinnacle of the spagyric art, alchemy, whatever it was, the magnum opus. And I think that's why, back to the Jesus homunculus, the reason that Jesus is crucified and cannibalized can also be attributed to the idea of him being a homunculus, because he grew up into old age and he was sacrificed for what? For the redemption of humanity. And his body was cannibalized in the Eucharist. It's supposed to be symbolic of you partaking in this, the blood and flesh of Christ, in order to what? To attain some sort of ascension. It's part of a ritual. So there it plays forth into the idea of the homunculus, where the homunculus is used, it's cannibalized, it's used, its bodily fluids, its bodily parts are used in certain magical aspects to give you magical powers. So that's also another idea to strengthen that hypothesis. But you see it with the story of the golem, where it needs to be killed every night, right? The rebirth of the phoenix. In the story of the Frankenstein, right? He wants to kill the Frankenstein monster. Obviously he doesn't, and he goes on to live on, right? And he follows him around every now and again. He'll leave him a note or whatever it was. But Paracelsus thought this was the ultimate creation. And other scholars argue, like, wait, so you're boasting about making an imitation, an emulation of the perfect creation, which is man, right? According, man, and I also mean woman on there.
Human, yeah,
Yeah,
human.
human, right? So people were like, wait, so you're boasting about a knockoff. Why would you be happy about that? So this leads me to my final thing, which I call the Crowley connection.
Well, that's not curious at all.
Because he wrote about homunculus. Now, we have touched on the idea of using stories to occult real life events. We have movies that, in some Hollywood movies, they've put in the beginning, based on true events, when it wasn't really based on true events, but in order to invoke a certain feeling in the person. There's the idea of a person being a vessel. You have the movie Hereditary. What was all that about? Taking different body parts, putting them together in order to have a vessel for Paimon, right? One of the princes of hell. That's a movie. That movie at the beginning, I believe they say it's based on true events. So even if it is fiction, even if it is a movie, even if it's a story, it evokes real feelings, real energy, based on some people who are just in a movie studio, right? There have been movies where they have taken people to court to prove that it was just a movie. I think it was The Green Inferno, or one of these crazy movies that have been banned from all these or Cannibal Holocaust, or some movies that are like so dark and just bloody. They're like, wait, prove that these people are still alive, in court. There's been movies like that. There's movies who as of recently, Terrifier 2 was making people feel some type of way, being possessed in the movie theaters. So I think this is all by design. So we get to Crowley, where he wrote a book called Moonchild. It's about a fight between two sects of magicians over an unborn child. And that was published in I want to say 1927. I could be wrong on that. In 1929. He wrote it in 1917, and it was published in 1929 by Mandrake Press, which is interesting because the mandrake plant is also attributed to the homunculus. And in 1914, I actually think I got this date wrong. I think it was like 1906 or something like that. Anyways, between September 6th and October 8th of the early 1900s, Crowley wrote Liber 367 Vel de Homunculo, of the homunculus. And he talked about how to create a homunculus. Now, you take a woman, astrological alignment needs to be aligned a certain way. You take a man, and they have sex in a ceremonial setting. And when they're invoking certain energies, she is only able to see certain things during this time. And every day they do it until she is pregnant. And he believed that up until the 2-month mark, the fetus didn't have a soul. That only happened in the 3rd month mark. And this idea that this fetus is a vessel, it makes me think of the whole controversy of nowadays of why they, what's the case? I forget the name of it because I don't.
Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade. It makes me think of why that's such a big thing. And here you have one of the greatest occultists, unfortunately, talking about how a fetus is a vessel for entities or spirits or whatever up into the 2nd month mark. And once he goes on to write here, a human being can only become a homunculus if possessed by a demon to such an extent that the human soul is irrevocably expelled to the same degree as in death and freed utterly so that it seeks a new tenement and it is cut off absolutely from the old. But even this, rare as it must be, except in lunacy, involves an extension of the natural meaning of the term homunculus. So he's taking everything from antiquity, because he was also into alchemy, and changing it. How I mentioned at the beginning, a magical process is meant to be changed, a magical to fit the practitioner. So here he is talking about his own version. So once the woman becomes pregnant, she's going to be put in a consecrated circle, right?
Further, let a great circle be drawn and consecrated to the sphere of the work. And this place should be a great desert, for in such do rarely wander any human souls seeking incarnation. Mind you, we're talking about the elites. You got Crowley, you got Parsons, you got Marjorie Cameron, and I related to Epstein. Because a consecrated circle, they thought that at the James Shelby Downard believed that a homunculus was inside the almost half million pound giant steel bottle named Jumbo at the U.S. government placed near Ground Zero on July 16, 1945, known as the Trinity Site in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. And if you look at that site, it's like a big 14-sided shape, and not far from that. So keeping that in mind, that the U.S. government, big surprise, was trying to animate a homunculus, according to Mr. Downard here. And there's other movies, like some people have tagged me on Twitter, some connections to this show, Twin Peaks, and all that stuff that shows and that strengthen this conspiracy theory. Because now we're getting into the speculative realm, right? I finished talking about the history of the homunculus with actual dates, names. You can look all this up yourself. And I'm adding this touch because I like to relay everything to modern day, because I do believe that they're using magic of antiquity and modern day. It's the same thing. And this next part that I'm going to be talking about, this is purely speculation on my end, connections that I've made. But not far from the Trinity site, you have the house, the Zorro Ranch of Epstein, which we all know who that piece of shit is. But he had a 33,339 square foot ranch, right? Weird numbers.
Yeah.
It's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
And it was on 10,000 acres, about 180 air miles away from the Trinity site in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. And we're talking about using a fetus essentially as a talisman, right? That's essentially what it is. Talismanic magic using outside influences, because Crowley's talking about letting an entity go into this fetus and letting it grow up. Some people say that the Babylon working ritual gave birth to, some say, Hinton. And that's why the magical name of Marjorie Cameron was Hilarion, Hillary Clinton. You have all those crazy, because the same time that happened was around the same year Hillary Clinton was born. So again, you have all these stories, movies, Rosemary's Baby, about invoking, right, Satan's and the Antichrist, the baby of Satan, whatever. And it turns out that Roman Polanski was doing what? Oh, raping girls too, right? After the fact that he made that movie that was about the rape of a child, he had to escape to another country because he was also raping kids. So these occultists are making these movies based on what I believe. I believe Moonchild was a hint at that Crowley tried to make a homunculus or a Moonchild. Just how Marjorie Cameron also tried to make a homunculus, an interracial homunculus, in a cult she had made called the Children after Parsons had died. Parsons was jerking off in the desert trying to summon a homunculus as well with L. Ron Hubbard in the Babylon Working. So again, they're piggybacking off of each other. And we land at Epstein, where at his Zorro Ranch, there is a consecrated circle outside of it, in the middle of a desert on 10,000 acres of land, where allegedly at this house, they had the elites visiting there. They had a whole basement full of camera equipment to where they would do things to people there so they could have blackmail. The same thing we saw with Ghislaine Maxwell and everything in New York, that they had this honey pot where they would let these elites do all these things so they would have dirt on them, right? They were doing this in New Mexico. Also, there was the article that came out that he was trying to impregnate 20 women at once in order to seed a master race. So is it connected? Was he trying to make an army of homunculi or of people? I don't know. This is, again, it's pure speculation. But when you start to
the cutest army ever.
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
I love this. I love the idea of speculation. And, just a bit ago, you were talking about, and basically, ultimately, like what we're trying to find is truth. Like, we can speculate, we can dig and start to make connections. And I think we're going to make incredible discoveries.
And I leave it for the end, right after I've gone on this whole thing with history. And this is not too long ago. It was in 1917, early 1900s. It's not too long ago that these guys are writing about this. And if you follow the Illuminati agenda or the reptilian agenda, they're piggybacking off of one another. So, of course, they revere these occultists of back then who exposed these secrets. And, hey, wonder what happens if I try it. I have all this money. I have all this land, all this stuff. Why not look at this grim war and also try it myself? Wow, okay. It's the Faustian pact. It's the Mephistopheles helps Wagner make the homunculus, but it only works because Mephistopheles is there and he helped with his magical demonic powers help make the homunculus. So what's the homunculus doing? He's trying to, I want to be a real boy, I want to be a real
Pinocchio,
person. Yeah, exactly. So he's what's Pinocchio? A talisman. He was, a boy. I want to be a real. So that's the whole. Again, you see these reflections of these stories. That's just all they are, stories, right? But they speak to the subconscious quietly. They're in there working as you're watching, and you're in a trance-like state. Just, wow, this is a really great. You know what I'm saying? You go there and you go to this temple, a theater, where you sit down and you have this screen in front of you. It's an initiation, essentially. It's what it is, bro. Like if you really look at all these things, it's all an initiation. So if you look at the pictures of the Zorro Ranch, there is a consecrated circle outside of it. Damn. And I believe that this was a place where Epstein was using this to try and create a homunculus. And then before this, you have Marjorie Cameron Kimmel. And she, again, in California, in the middle of nowhere, she gathered a loose clique of magical practitioners around herself with what she called the children. And she was trying to make an interracial muncha. So it was pretty much an orgy. She eventually became pregnant. She was talking about how her child was the Wormwood Star. So pretty much the Antichrist, whatever you want to call it. Eventually that one ended in a miscarriage, but she ended up having another child. She's alive today, actually.
Wow.
And yeah, Epstein reportedly had the warped idea of using the ranch for inseminating women with his sperm with the aim of creating a master race. So I relate that to modern day. And then you have what I mentioned earlier. You have Epstein and all these guys. You have the Kardashians using surrogate mothers. Well, alchemically speaking, those are alchemical vessels that, again, they are the egg is outside the womb. They do everything outside the womb, outside the matrix, and they insert it into the woman to later have the baby, which I also believe that they plan the astrological alignments. And I was watching the Kardashians the other day for research purposes, of course, with my wife. And she was boasting about how the mom was boasting about how it was going to be a Leo. I'm saying like, oh, what does a Leo put out there? Astrology also plays a big role into all these magical practices. Well, Leo is, the charismatic, they're in the limelight. So they need somebody like that. And I think that it all goes back to the alchemical homunculus, the homunculus of antiquity, whatever you want to call it, and they're trying to do the same thing today. And if you look at a lot of these elites, they've had a lot of surrogate birth. I'm not saying all. I mean, I call my kids homunculus, but they don't. Sometimes I'll look at my son. I'll be like, man, like the Dave Chappelle skit, like you were my balls, man. Totally. My was like, don't say that to him. Like, bro, you were my ball sack. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's it's crazy. So that's what I got. And this is a developing field. And there's every time I again, it's 3 degrees of separation from any major topic. So every now and again, I'll be researching something. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a little bit like some homunculus talk. And I add it to the repertoire and the mind palace in order to bring it up later. But absolutely, I think that these elites are reading these same texts. They know about it. It's not a big secret, and they use it to literally rule the world. I mean, that's what they're all about. And I think they're alive and strong today, and they're still doing it, bro.
Again, centuries and centuries and centuries have passed. You don't think somebody has thought, I wonder, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not saying, whatever. We don't have any, I guess, substantial sort of proof of this necessarily. Okay, here's one thing that I think about too, because we were shooting holes in the mud flood theory. At first, I was like really interested in that when people were talking about it. But you watch a couple of videos of a landslide and tell me that a building is going to stand up and all the ground is going to move around it. That's not how a landslide works. So as much as I want to romanticize ideas, and I believe there could have been a more sophisticated, logical, rational, better civilization behind us. Sure. I romanticize all that shit. But I'm not buying that. But I do remember like some of these different documentaries and stuff that I'd seen with like test tube babies at the World's Fair and things like that. Like,
wait, what?
So I remember one of these documentaries that I saw. It was Ewarrenon. It's like a long ass documentary, and it's supposed to be a flat Earth documentary. He talks about the mud flood. He talks about like all these things, and he connects a bunch of different stuff together. At some point, they're talking about the World's Fair, specifically, I believe the one in Chicago, and how they had these babies in incubators in these World's Fairs that people would go and look at. Yes. And that was always curious to me, because the one thing that they talk about in there is, they show all these pictures of just like huge buildings and empty towns, empty San Francisco, empty, Russia. And these buildings are built like way before. And there's people with horse and buggy. Yeah, let me put this up.
Hold on, let me take this freaking ad thing on here.
But
so
one of the one of the big theories is that they repopulated the Earth, basically.
What did I pull up yesterday? Trust the science. Saved by the seance. Twins displayed in incubators at Chicago's second World's Fair are now 84 and nestled happily in the suburbs. Wow, bro.
Dude. Oh my God. Yeah, that is some creepy shit. So what is an NPC?
Oh, dude, I did a whole thing on that and people got pissed off. So,
well, I mean, to me, this stuff could be somewhat potentially correlated. I'm not saying that it is. We're in the speculation portion anyway, and I think that's fun. I mean, dude, I think that's part of the good times of all of this shit.
You just unlocked like a new whole section. Check this out: the strange case of Dr. Coney. How a mysterious European showman saved thousands of American babies. Wow, bro. You just blew my mind right now, bro.
What the fuck?
It's like new level unlocked.
Yes.
Bro, hold on. I gotta hit the button, dude. I gotta hit the button.
Illuminati confirmed.
FBI, open up!
We're getting too close to the truth here, bro. So, yeah. That's really interesting because I'm gonna say it, bro. What if, according to Tartarian doctrines, I'm just gonna add that there. What if these, right? Because they talk about the train orphans, which I relate the train to alchemy because it's the movement of the burning and the reburning of certain things to create ash, and that's the alchemical process, the whitening and the burning, the blackening. What if the babies that they say have populated all these cities were actually homunculus, bro?
Well, it doesn't make sense. Where do all these fucking orphans come from? And then if you look back into those times, think about all the fiction, which we know is propaganda that's being pumped out at the time. It's all fucking orphan children. Please, sir, can I have some more, sir? Every fucking book is orphans. So they're targeting that entire demographic of orphans.
Living babies in incubators. So, wow, dude. All the world loves a baby. Okay, yeah, I think I've seen enough of this.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but it's pretty interesting to see how quickly the world is being populated and why whoever they are, the elite just devalue human life so much. I mean, if they can just wave a wand and then there's just thousands of people populating a place. They're like, we need more people. We need more workers. Think about that industrial age, right? The early 1900s. We need people to be able to make all this shit and put all this stuff together and work in factories and put doors on cars and all of that kind of stuff. So we need a big, labor force. Some of the interesting ideas and theories from like the whole flat earth, mud flood, Tartaria thing, people have presented it in a lot of different ways, but some of the points are pretty interesting. Like specifically things like the World's Fair and all the electricity that it would have taken to have that. Like that was apparently not possible at that time. So there's a big loophole or plot hole there. The whole babies in the incubator thing. I
remember seeing that, but I again, this was before I had even thought about the homunculus, but now I think, I know we're shitting on the Tartarian crowd right now, but I think that they're going to like me more after I start talking about Tartaria and maybe them having homunculus.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no telling. Even the flat earth stuff, right? Like I had David Weiss on, and I'll continue to have people who have, because I'm more of a simulation guy anyway. So to me, I don't know, like space does kind of seem fake. I don't know what NASA's doing. I've seen so many videos.
It's fake and homosexual. So the way we talk about it is, as you're launching in this phallus up into space, right? You got the Jeff Bezos replica of his dick launching into space. Maybe perhaps that's why they only went to a certain height, because they said if we cross this threshold, we become homosexual. I think that's what if they're
I don't think they're scared of being gay, man.
What if they're hinting at the fact that the gays come from outer space? I don't know. I mean, that's just
just running around with Moloch, just snapping each other with towels and shit.
People are gonna fucking hate this episode, bro.
No, don't hate it. We're only here speaking the truth. We got to add, we got to have a little bit of humor here.
That's part of the alchemical process. Add a little bit of, because people tell me all the time, bro, they'll be like, dude, I really enjoy your videos. I really enjoy how you're bringing this knowledge, and then I'll be locked in a trance and taking this information, and out of nowhere you just put in a jig joke or something, and you just snap me out of it, and I laugh my ass because you're not expecting it. So I think that's part of my secret, where you just sprinkle in a little bit of the comedy, and you gotta have fun, bro, because a lot of these topics do get dark and fucked up and all this stuff. So you gotta have fun with it. And I have a dark sense of humor. I was talking to my wife about how some people don't understand me because I have a sarcastic sense of humor too. So people think I'm being serious about a lot of things I'm talking about. And to add to the concept of, I look at it how Terrence McKenna talks about it, where you can have these toys, and these toys are made of ideas, words, thoughts, and you manipulate them and you put them back on the shelf. Just because we're talking about, maybe perhaps some people being NPCs or homunculus or whatever, except for the people who have reached out to me saying that they believe that they're homunculus. I'm not saying that. It's just an idea that we're conversing about it. We're coming to a conclusion and putting that toy back. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't take it for face value sometimes. You can have a conversation, because some people get so wrapped up in these ideologies and they go, oh, well, you just said that. Yeah, I said that. And what? What are you trying to get at?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous if someone writes you off just because you have one differing opinion of them. I see it all the time, but I mean, that is like totally, I'm done with you now. You say one thing I don't agree with, but the truth of it is like, what is the old saying? And I guess it's attributed to Aristotle, I think, but it's like, the mark of an educated mind is to be able to entertain two thoughts at the same time. And
of course he'd say that, bro. I mean, he was just talking about some other shit we just finished covering. So he was the OG podcaster. Like, wait, guys, it's the mark of an educated man to talk about things without accepting them.
Hear me out.
Boom. Yeah. Politician, bro. Fucking famous.
Dude,
like,
yeah. I mean, yeah, there's some weird shit in there, but I mean, but ultimately, right? Like the whole point is to explore it and ultimately, hopefully find some truth. And we've been wrong. I've been wrong. Like I got, about all kinds of things. It's okay. That's part of the process, is like pulling back the layers. So, it's so easy to get triggered. And especially once we've changed from one belief system to another belief system or paradigm or mental map or whatever, like then we just carry on triggers that are just we still get triggered the same. They're just different words that trigger us. It's about really opening that up and being like, okay, look, I can, I don't really know what's going on here. Let's unpack this stuff. Let's see where it takes us and learn how to not get fucking triggered. You know, that's a large part of my work, is like doing our own mental modeling, right? Like we have a map. The map is not the territory, but we have a map and we see the territory based on that map. So if we can kind of get rid of some of this shit that's holding us back, these little weird beliefs and programs that we've been indoctrinated into, and you don't see the thing that you are blind to, right? So kind of going in there and being really, really intentional about our mind, then, you know, I think we can open up to more and more levels of understanding. Like you're talking about new level unlocked, you know?
New level unlocked. That's
Exactly.
like, it was like a shadow character. And then when you unlock it, like you see it's just a silhouette first. And like, you just unlock like a whole new level. Like, oh, shit.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like the idea of the homunculus, like the little man inside the head, right? Like it makes me think of the Eastern observing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, who's watching the thoughts at that point, right? And then turtles all the way down. One of my favorite quotes. I love Robert Anton Wilson.
Now you can say homunculi all the way down.
Right, homunculi.
People are gonna
all
be
the
like,
way
"What the
down.
fuck are you talking about?" Well, the homunculus argument is this narrative fallacy that talks about the homunculus is like the Russian doll. You know, there's all. So, dude, it's wild.
Little baby Jesus.
Little, you know? Yeah. I mean, the history is there for those that want to confirm it. Feel free. And that was, again, I like to leave the speculation. Whenever I do an episode, I like to leave the speculation for the end, because that way you get everything that, even then, history is subjective too, bro. Like you can't take that for face value.
There's so many different sides to that so many we don't even hear. So yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I just admire you for putting the work in and following your curiosity, because I mean, it's like you said, 3 degrees of separation. I couldn't agree more. Like all of these things, they're written up. There's Crowley. I'm looking at it right now on this other screen. Like, here's the whole fucking procedure, right? Like, here's the beginning, the second part, and like exactly how to carry all of this out, which is creepy as shit. I wouldn't have even known.
Yeah, and that, again, one of the greatest occultists of all, arguably one of the greatest occultists of all time. Everybody, right? The guy everybody loves to hate. I hate Crowley, but the fact that he is also has a role in this idea really blew my mind away. I had no, dude, until I started looking into it, I didn't know that he was writing about this stuff too. And then when I say you pull it up, you go, oh, he wrote this in the early 1900s. It's not that long ago. You know what I mean? And he's talking about how the Greeks were involved in things like this too. When a woman was pregnant, she could only intake certain movies, or certain arts, like certain plays at that time, certain music, certain foods, certain things during the gestation period. Like, that's history. So it comes back to the whole eugenics and certain people being able to interbreed. And in the Bible, it talks about illicit mixtures, abominable mixtures. Like, you can't mix certain people together. You can't mix certain linens together. You can't mix certain animals together not because it can't be done. You know, cloning is illegal in a lot of different countries, not because it can't be done, but because they don't want you to do it. So why make something that's impossible illegal?
Good point. You don't have to do that, right?
Exactly. It's like, oh, it's just make believe. Let's make it illegal. Let's check these motherfuckers.
Well, as long as a guy in a white coat does it, then it's fine.
Trust the seance. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's gonna go back to. I'm gonna put that on a shirt too. By the way, that design that I showed you, it's gonna be on a shirt.
I love that.
So I gotta do some touch ups on it, but yeah, that's part of it, bro. And the homunculus is just another chapter in the weird tales of the Juan podcast. And I know Tripley and Johnny, they were all about it too. They were really into it, and like I'm telling you, there's something about the subject that just draws people in. It's like and again, there's a lot of haters on it too, but I don't give a shit because I'm here to talk about interesting things that Juan likes to talk about. That's why it's the Juan on Juan podcast.
Fuck yeah. And I love your show. Love what you're doing. I think it's great. I'd love to do another episode. Maybe we get Paranoid American. We can talk about alchemy and the history of that, maybe, or something.
Yeah, definitely. He's the one that he knows a lot about Paracelsus, and when him and I get together, it's like this alchemical explosion that happens, and we like put out just great stuff. And that's why I'm trying to just keep it going. Strike while the iron's hot. We are making, similar to the MK Ultra pamphlet, how he did up the MK Ultra one. We're going to be doing a homunculus one on that one. That one's underway right now. and it's going to be the entire history of the homunculus, how we did here with the
That's dope.
MK Ultra. It's going to be all about the homunculus, and I'm really looking forward to that.
That's awesome. I love that, dude. Fuck yeah. That's badass. Yeah, you guys are doing great. I've had you both on the show separately, so I'd love to get you both on at the same time, and I think that might be a good topic if y'all are down, and we'll talk about that later. But dude, I'll of course make sure all your links are in the show notes. Is there anything? I'm going to put this out today because it's fucking holidays,
Yeah.
This will be an interesting thing for people who are traveling this week and going. It might make for some interesting people
What the
chatting.
fuck is this guy talking about, honey?
Yeah. You really want to fucking freak your family out at the dinner tables? Bring up homunculus, right? Well, it's better than 9/11. Okay, let's just be honest.
It's like, let's normalize having the homunculus talk with your kids. Like, hey, let's sit down, Billy. You might have been a homunculus. We made you. It's like, what are you talking about, Dad? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's normalize that at the
Like
dinner
the
table.
talk.
Let's like how my how my hat says, make esoterica great again. I'm gonna make make the homunculus great again because
make Jesus homunculus again.
Don't that one. That one would really triggers people. You motherfucker. So
I get it. No, I appreciate that. I have a lot of people in my life who are Christians. I'm certainly not trying to be disrespectful of anybody's beliefs or any of that.
Yeah, no. Again, I love Jesus, bro. He's awesome. So
he can definitely take a joke. I'll tell you that much. After everything the man's been through, I'm pretty sure a joke is
the
fine.
least of his worries.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, dude, thank you so much, dude. I'm stoked about this one. Thanks again. And we'll be in touch very, very soon. Anything you want to let people know about before we get out, things that you should check out, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. YouTube channel, One-on-One Podcast, my website, the1on1podcast.com. And I have all my stuff on there. My comic, you can find my comic book on there, my journals, and you can hit me up on Instagram at the One-on-One Podcast, on Twitter, TikTok. I don't have Facebook, so that's pretty much it. Find me on there. I usually respond back to everybody unless you're a fucking weirdo. And yeah, so catch me on there, bro.
Word. I'll put all those links down below for everybody. And dude, thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your afternoon there in sunny Florida. And yeah, man, we will talk very, very soon.
Appreciate you, bro.